Dear colleagues, I call this meeting to order. We are meeting in a webcast session. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 11 du.
Welcome to meeting number 11 of our committee.
Internal economy requires that committees adhere to the following health protocols, which are in effect until June 23, 2022. All individuals wishing to enter the parliamentary precinct must be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. All those attending in person must wear a mask, except for members who are at their place during proceedings. And as you know, you can contact our excellent clerk for further information on preventive measures for health and safety. As the chair, I will enforce these measures, and as always, I thank you for your cooperation. La réunion d'aujourd'hui
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid manner.
A few rules to follow. Interpretation services are available at this meeting. You may speak in the official language of your choice. At the bottom of your screen, you may choose to hear floor audio or in English or French. The raise hand feature is on the main toolbar should you wish to speak. Un rappel que vous devriez.
I would remind you that you should address yourself to the chair whenever you speak.
Maintain a speaking list for all members. We'd like to welcome all our witnesses tonight. We are grateful for your time and your effort, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. We have appearing as an individual, Andrea Wishart, a student at the University of Saskatchewan. Welcome. From the Council of Canadian Innovators, Benjamin Bergen, who is the president, and Nicholas Schiavo, Director, Federal Affairs, and from Mohawk College, Ron McCurley, President and Chief Executive Officer. Each of you will have 5 minutes to present. At the 4.5-minute mark, I will hold up a yellow card, which lets you know there's 30 seconds to go. Again, we thank you for joining us, and we'll begin. So for 5 minutes, over to Ms. Wishart. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you today. I join you from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, located within Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis Nation. I'm a PhD student and occasional sessional lecturer in biology at the University of Saskatchewan. I've served as president of my department's Biology Graduate Students Association, and I currently serve as the senior student postdoctoral counselor for the Canadian Society of Ecology and Evolution. These roles have informed my experiences of the incredible talent we have in Canada, as well as the challenges and hard choices that today's early career researchers face. But I come to you today just as myself, a Canadian woman highly trained in the life sciences and hopeful for where the next step might take me. You've heard from witnesses in the past few weeks of the typical career trajectory someone like me can be expected to follow. Even after earning my bachelor's degree over 10 years ago, I'm still considered an early career researcher, and as such, I still have many forks in the road ahead. Whether those diverging paths lead to industry, government, or academia, it is critical that those forks become opportunities for choice, rather than pinch points where we lose talent. My research seeks to understand how animals make choices about what to do with limited energetic resources. Can I thrive and invest in my future, the next generation, or am I barely hanging on just to survive for another day? I see reflected in the squirrels that I study as a biologist the trade-offs we must make with limited resources as early career researchers. But I also see what increased resources can let happen. Individuals can survive and thrive. Canada is an incredibly educated country, and that comes about because we champion our many existing strengths. Strengths like the existence of our distinct research-based master's programs considered significant accomplishments in their own right. These programs help ensure a workforce equipped with research-based skill sets for individuals who do not want or need to pursue a full PhD or want to pursue a different path for their PhD. In my case, I completed a master's studying mouse genomics and decided to take those skills into a different arena for my PhD studying ecology and evolution. Investing in master's students means investing in Canada. The next major training stage is the PhD. If you can secure the very competitive but low levels of funding. But if you can squeak by the end of this apprenticeship, the researcher now has years of hands-on experience in statistics, communication, and creative problem solving that can all serve to solve the problems of today and tomorrow and make the advancements that we need to move society forward. The PhD is long, it's oftentimes very tough, but it produces a mind keen and ready to pursue and put those sharpened skills to work. Investing in PhD students means investing in Canada. But where to put them to work and with what funding? We now come to another major fork in the road that has massive ramifications for the life and career of the individual and for the nation's workforce. You see, at this point, the researcher has spent years paying ever-rising tuition with stipends that have remained stagnant for years of not being able to build savings that make a relatively low-paying postdoctoral position less attractive. Even the prestigious NSERC postdoctoral fellowships are highly competitive, but still only worth $45,000 a year. This alone can make the lure of well-funded postdocs or more competitive industrial salaries outside of Canada an undeniable option. A pinch point after so much investment in these individuals now threatened by limited opportunity to bridge them into the sectors where they're most needed. Investing in postdocs means investing in Canada. Canada, by investing in education and innovation, has invested in me. I now see the next fork in the road ahead for myself. Where do I put my skills to work? And with what funding? Is having a family compatible with a career in science, or will I become another leaky pipeline statistic? We have mechanisms in place that have proven time and time again to work, things like MyTax and Tri-Council agency funding. But like a once strong muscle that's been left to atrophy, the dollar value and accessibility of these mechanisms will weaken over time if not regularly reinvested in. That the committee I speak to this evening was formed through a unanimous vote speaks volumes to the value that citizens and our representatives place on the health of the science and research ecosystem in Canada. As an early career researcher trained in Canada, we want to stay. We want to do the work. To commit to a career rooted in science and research is to profess our conviction that a better future is in our hands for the making. We just need the resources to survive and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wishart, and I know the whole committee will be wishing you luck with your PhD, and you have a really interested committee here. We will now go to the Council of Canadian Innovators, and I'm not sure if I'm guessing the President, Benjamin Bergen, will be speaking for 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Standing Committee on Research and Science. Thank you for the opportunity to present today on the study of top talent, research, and innovation. As you know, my name is Nick Schiavo, and I'm appearing this evening as the Director of Federal Affairs on behalf of the Council of Canadian Innovators, and I am joined by CCI President Benjamin Bergen. We are a national business council representing 150 of Canada's fastest growing companies. Our member companies are headquartered here in Canada, employing north of 52,000 employees across Canada, and are market leaders in the sectors of health, clean, and financial technologies, cybersecurity, and more. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, the digitization of Canada's economy and public services has increased at a rapid rate. This shift, ongoing for many years, has created innovation and prosperity in many sectors. However, it has also added increased pressure on Canadian scale-ups to find the skilled talent required to fuel a digital future where growth can be sustained. The priorities that I will speak to today address Canadian scale-ups and their ability to train, attract, and retain top talent that improves Canada's innovation outputs in development and commercialization. This goal is critical to ensuring that Canada remains competitive in today's global intangible economy. I'd like to begin by briefing you on the pressures facing domestic technology companies in Canada in their pursuit of attracting and retaining highly skilled talent. A recent report from the Information and Communications Technology Council estimated that by 2025, Canada's digital economy will employ 2.26 million Canadians. That's 11% of all employment in the country. But this will require an additional 250,000 jobs to be created over the next 3 years. CCI's members and Canada's scale-up companies are committed to creating many of the new jobs required, but they face a serious talent supply issue. Unfortunately, scale-up companies can't just maintain their workforce. They need to grow rapidly, and adding the best and brightest talent remains a constant priority. A recent survey of CCI's members found that most companies plan to increase their workforces by 20% this year alone. That's an additional 10,000 more workers added to our company and economy by this year's end. It's important to note that in addition to the private sector, the shortage of skilled labor in Canada is having an equally negative impact on the public sector. In April, a spokesperson for the Communications Security Establishment acknowledged this crisis, stating that recruitment for Canada's cybersecurity workforce remains, quote, challenging and highly competitive. For years, the shortage of skilled talent has been a driving concern for CCI, but the recent shift to remote work has only exacerbated the problem. Canada's skilled workers are now part of a global labor market, where geography is no longer as important. Our domestic innovators are finding themselves in fierce competition with global companies who can offer significantly higher salaries for the same crop of highly skilled workers. This is driving up wage inflation across our companies. Earlier this year, CCI surveyed our members on this topic and found that wage expectations have increased by 20 to 25% over the past year. This is not sustainable. Acknowledging this, CCI recently released a talent and skill strategy with 13 key recommendations to meet the talent needs of our country's fastest growing companies. I look forward to discussing these recommendations with you today. These recommendations speak to the need to increase the generation, attraction, and retention of skilled workers for Canadian firms. This strategy was developed in collaboration with Canadian entrepreneurs and the innovation ecosystem to provide clear, tangible policy recommendations to combat this issue from all angles. These recommendations outlined span 4 focus areas. First, a focus on talent attraction by bringing more tech talent to Canada, updating the National Occupation Classification Codes, expanding alternative credentials, and enhancing the global talent stream and global skill strategy. Second, a focus on talent generation by financially supporting Canadian businesses who upskill their workforce and incentivizing post-secondary institutions to develop better experiential learning opportunities. Third, a focus on talent retention by introducing innovative solutions to support recent graduates with student debt and a commitment to leave employee stock options unchanged as a key incentive for Canadian innovators. Finally, we acknowledge that there is no silver bullet or one-size-fits-all solution to properly address the shortage of skilled labor. Instead, we are calling for a whole-of-government approach to build capacity and apply a skilled talent lens to all economic policies and programs. To conclude, with smart changes to existing strategies and the development of new measures where required, we can ensure Canadian scale-ups have access to world-class talent and become leaders in the digital economy. Without this strong base of homegrown scale-ups, we will not be able to generate the economic growth and public wealth necessary to pay for the public services that Canadians depend upon. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for bringing your perspective. Again, we're really glad to have you as witnesses tonight. And now we will go to the President and Chief Executive Officer of Mohawk College, and that's Ron McCurley. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, to you and to the committee for providing me with the opportunity to address you this evening. As mentioned, I have the privilege of serving as President and CEO of Mohawk College, based in Hamilton, Ontario. Mohawk is one of the top 10 research colleges in Canada. Community and industry partners engage our college for workforce development needs, rapid training, and our ability to quickly address challenges that are limiting their productivity. We provide students with essential experience in partnership with researchers to develop and deploy customized innovations that increase efficiency and give organizations a competitive advantage. These partnerships provide employers with the ability to attract and retain highly skilled and competent workers. Today, I'd like to recommend 4 ideas that would make a significant and lasting impact on Canadian colleges, our employers, and the communities we both serve. The first relates to international learners. Many cities like Hamilton are working to attract and retain international learners as a way to address critical workforce needs. To successfully do so, it's essential that the federal government create the conditions to make Canada a destination of choice for international students. Timely and efficient study visa approvals and ready access to work permits upon graduation will help ensure Canada attracts the best and the brightest to our communities. Employment incentive programs targeted specifically for international students and graduates will create more immediate opportunities for graduates to establish themselves and contribute to the economy. Incentive programs designed to help international student graduates set up or transition into their own business will also ensure Canada is a destination of choice. These opportunities will motivate international learners to live and settle in the community with their families, buy a property, become a key part of the city's economy. The first recommendation then is to please continue to find ways to make it easy and efficient for international students to study in Canada, including timely access to study visas and postgraduate work permits, and consider providing targeted incentive programs for employers to hire international students and graduates. My second recommendation relates to the retention of the workforce. We need to encourage domestic students to settle in the area. As part of their education, many of our learners are involved in work on projects, co-ops, and internships with employers.
Madam Speaker, Madam Chair.
For a second, I'm sorry to interrupt. Monsieur Blanchette-Chalcard.
Oui.
Madam Speaker, we haven't had translation for about 20 seconds.
Ça fonctionne présentement, mais dès le discours de monsieur jusqu'à...
It's working now, but at the beginning of the speech, there was no translation.
There was an audio issue from Mr. McCurley.
20 seconds, should we go back?
Ça fonctionne bien présentement, merci.
It's working properly now, thank you.
Mr. McCurley, if you want to go back about 20 seconds.
To find ways to make it easy and efficient for international students to study in Canada, including timely access to study visas and
Mr.
McCurley, work permits.
Sorry, if I could ask you to lift your mic, your boom, up to about your lip level. If we could just try if that's better. Can we do a sound check, please?
Testing 1, 2. Is that
That's
okay?
Better. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. The first recommendation, again, is to continue to find ways to make it easy and efficient for international students to study in Canada, including timely access to study visas and postgraduate work permits, and consider providing targeted incentive programs for employers to hire international students and graduates. My second recommendation relates to the retention of the workforce. We need to encourage domestic students to settle in the area. As part of their education, many of our learners are involved in work on projects or co-ops or internships with employers, providing meaningful work integrated learning. But the work doesn't continue after the initial term because the SMEs don't have the funding to hire and retain those students upon graduation. The second recommendation is to consider programs that would support small and medium-sized enterprises in hiring learners as they study and then keep them employed as the company innovates and builds capacity. This benefits the student and the employer and strengthens the community. The third relates to funding opportunities of colleges. I'd like to begin by thanking the Government of Canada for the many programs currently funded in our sector. There are challenges, however. Today, colleges have to wait for open calls for proposals to be posted once or twice a year, and they often don't align with project opportunities, creating unnecessary urgency for partnerships and proposals. Also, I would respectfully submit that 6 to 8 months is too long for the review of a project submission. The third recommendation is to offer programs with ongoing intakes, rolling application dates, and multiple opportunities to submit proposals. Colleges have been proven to respond quickly to help address industry challenges, and providing ongoing access to research funds would allow colleges to help business and industry partners quickly develop new technologies and processes. Finally, the committee recently heard from our friends and partners at Colleges and Institutes Canada, Denise Amiot, and Durham College President Don LaVisa. I echoed their points about the importance of funding applied research projects at Canadian colleges. For example, Mohawk applied research projects raised more than $3.3 million last year from industry. However, our college only received $17,600 from the Research Support Fund. The final recommendation is to increase support for the Research Support Fund or create a new funding option for colleges that can address the unique needs to allow us to expand and execute the research projects with the varying sectors. Colleges across Canada are deeply involved in and committed to the communities we serve. We train and educate the local workforce, and colleges support and strengthen businesses, industries, and organizations. Colleges are leaders and contributors to vibrant, prosperous communities. Your support of our role and mission is greatly appreciated. In closing, I'd like to thank you for your time this evening, and I'm happy to expand on any of my points during your question time. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I really would like to thank all the witnesses. We're grateful for your expertise tonight. Our colleagues here have many questions, so we're going to go to the first round of questions, and this will be a 6-minute round, and we will start with Mr. Tucker tonight.
Thank you kindly. I'm going to be splitting my time actually with Madam Gladue. She has some questions for this panel, and just to start off with the Council of Canadian Innovators suggested micro-credentials through partnerships between academia and industry to train workers in cutting the edge tech. Could you expand on that, on what role you envision the federal government playing in that process?
Yeah, thank you for that question. When it comes to international or alternative credentials, highly skilled tech workers may not have the formal credentials or that kind of formal education that we typically look for. And I think what's more than that is that what we're seeing is innovative companies may actually require a wide range of technical skills depending on the product, service, or industry that they're trying to disrupt or transform. And given that this industry is moving so fast, that traditional model may just not cut it anymore. That's really what we're hearing from our members. And so really, I think the idea behind this recommendation is for the government to play a role in creating more flexibility within the immigration system to allow for a wider range of candidates to be considered who are self-taught or have pursued, alternative education paths. Now, obviously there has to be some criteria, there has to be guardrails in place. That is something that we and our members would be very eager to engage and consult on to make sure that there is some form of rubric. But I think the idea is we need to, move away from that formal education process that is kind of becoming a drain on the talent market. I don't know if my President Benjamin has anything to add on to that as well.
Thanks, Nick. I think just in terms of supporting the specific comments that was raised by the member, the federal government's, definitely role in some of this will be looking at how funds are allocated in terms of upskilling and retraining. And in our
sorry, Mr. Bergen, I'm going to have to interrupt. We have no interpretation. If you could give us a second.
We've already reached out to him, done the best we could. That's what the situation is for now.
He doesn't have the correct mic.
Okay, we've tried many different mics on my end to get this to work. So maybe I will just kindly bow out and just leave it for Nick to pick up the baton for our organization.
Thank you for being so gracious.
Thank you, Ben. I'll just maybe follow up on where I think Ben was going to go, which is to say that the federal government can absolutely play a role in upskilling and retraining as well. And, there are examples across Canada of Canadian companies who have already developed these curriculums that fit with the industry, that meet the need. And so there's a variety of solutions the federal government can provide in terms of supporting these companies for that upskilling, whether it's in the form of a financial kickback or tax break. But what we've seen is that the private sector, our innovators, are stepping up where we need them. And if there's a role for some financial support from the federal government, it would go a long way in spurring more of that upskilling across Canada.
Just quickly, is there any similar provincial programs that are successful in our province or in our country? And if not country, are there any other countries around the world that you think are achieving what you're proposing here?
Yeah, great question. In terms of provincial level programs, I would have to get back to you on that. And I'm very happy to follow up with your office. What I will say in terms of some concrete examples, we have the Montreal-based FX Innovation. This is a company that partnered with the University of Ottawa to build a cloud campus program, and it's had very great success in terms of broadening the range of roles in the cloud computing sector. Another great example is in Alberta, which the Calgary Economic Development provided funding to Alta ML to create the Applied AI Lab, which aims to generate AI talent for the tech ecosystem. So two very examples that are near and dear to our heart at CCI of the innovation ecosystem stepping up for that reskilling. And is there a role for the federal government to play in supporting them? That's really what I think we want to discuss.
Remaining time, I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Very good. My question is for Ms. Wishart. As the first female engineer in the House of Commons, and as a woman who started her career by building a women's washroom everywhere I worked because there wasn't one, my question is, do you think there's more work to be done to eliminate discrimination against women as a barrier to attracting top talent in Canada?
Thank you. That's a fantastic question. And thank you for being such a pioneer on that front. It is definitely difficult in many ways to be a woman in science, even today. The biggest pinch point that I see isn't so much at the student level, where even up to the PhD, there's relatively large numbers of women participating. However, the big pinch point, and the one that I'm currently facing, is that kind of move from the PhD into either industry or into the postdoctoral fellowships. And of note, women only hold about 35% of NSERC's postgraduate or postdoctoral fellowship awards. There's only about 37% of the applicants are women applying for those. So there's a huge drop off in that. And part of that comes from sort of years and years of higher tuition and higher costs of living. But the awards and the stipends offered to students are stagnant, essentially. In particular, the CGS Masters and the PGSD Doctoral Awards haven't changed in value since 2003, and they're below the poverty line. And so by the time people such as myself are reaching the end of a PhD, years of spending lots of tuition money, we have no savings really backed up. And so you kind of get that point where there just isn't really that option to stay funded in that kind of career trajectory. So I think a huge part of it is investing in those sort of opportunities, particularly the postdoctoral level, to try to increase the participation of women.
Ms. Wishart.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you, Mr. Tucker, and to Ms. Gladue for their questions. And now we will go to Mr. Collins for 6 minutes.
And thanks, Madam Chairman, and welcome and thank you for all the witnesses for your attendance here this evening. I'll start first, Madam Chair, with Mr. McCurley from Mohawk College, if I could, and welcome Ron to the committee. I want to pick up on the immigration theme that you talked about earlier in your recommendations. One consistent message we've heard from witnesses to date is that, and I think Mr. Schiavo was very succinct in his comments, in that it is a global labor market and there's fierce competition. And so I think we recognize when there are discriminatory immigration practices in place, and we witnessed that during the last U.S. Administration, what kind of an effect it has on the labor market and the impact it has on attracting and retaining top talent. We noticed a brain drain in the U.S. and Canada was the beneficiary of that for a number of years. And so I guess I would ask through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. McCurley, how important is it for us to have immigration policies and legislation in place that actually attracts people from other parts of the world, and a message that says to the rest of the world, especially for those young people that are looking at colleges and universities here in Canada, that we're open for business and we welcome immigrants from all areas of the world.
Well, thank you, MP Collins, and so nice to see you. And thank you for all your support in Hamilton and Stoney Creek. It's very important, obviously, to keep Canada's brand as pristine as it is around the world when it comes to attracting talent. Most international students that I speak to, and we have about 5,000 that study at our college right now, come to Canada with a dream, not of working for somebody else, but of starting their own business. Many of them come from entrepreneurial families. Many of them are already focused on creating a business or helping to expand the family business. So any policy change that would help support entrepreneurs as they come into the country, as they study at colleges and universities, and then as they start their own businesses would be incredibly helpful. one of the biggest barriers they have right now is getting access to capital upon graduation to start or expand a business. The other thing, though, is they have options. This is a world full of options. And so as the IRCC runs into delays in terms of approving visas, they have options to go elsewhere where they might be able to get and start their studies quicker. So we need to make sure, to the extent possible, those backlogs are taken care of and that the timelines are relatively short to be able to get visas into students' hands.
Thank you for the answers. If I could, on a related subject, I know that student travel to Canada and specifically to Mohawk College, and I know McMaster University as well, was limited during the pandemic, and so the college had to pause, I'm assuming, for a couple of years while the travel was interrupted, not just here in Canada but across the globe. How have you pivoted since the borders have opened up, so to speak, and what suggestions do you have in terms of short-term, immediate priorities should the government be looking at? You gave us four recommendations, but what's the most pressing one, Ron, right now in terms of a post-pandemic recovery for colleges as it relates to top talent?
Yeah, thank you very much. So the IRCC was very helpful in allowing international students to start their Canadian studies abroad during the pandemic and study there for a period of time before they made their way to Canada. That was very helpful. So we continued with international students right through the pandemic. For a number of reasons, including some of the challenges in the geopolitical scene in the world right now, we have a huge number of students. We have over 12,000 applications right now from international students. For the college alone, McMaster has a significant number of international students as well. So probably the biggest need we have right now is to clear the backlog of visa applications and make sure that we can get those students into Canada to continue or start their studies here. Many of them who are willing to accept jobs working for others will have job offers on graduation. That won't be an issue. There's a huge number of vacancies in our marketplace, as you will know, and in fact, in most places across Canada. So the challenge right now is just to get them into the country, to land them so that we can continue or start their studies.
Sorry, thank you. Mr. Schiavo, I think I have less than a minute now. Can I just ask you very quickly, you had a number of recommendations that you provided to the committee. Can you tell us what the top priority is in terms of post-pandemic recovery and how we deal with top talent in that regard?
Absolutely. I think, honestly, it comes down to urgency. When we speak to our members, what we hear is we need talent now, if not 2 years ago. And so while we're very, adamant to throw everything at the wall and we talk about upskilling and retraining, I think, immigration in terms of top talent is key. And so I would echo, the other witnesses and say that if we can increase the timelines from the IRCC and ideally move towards a 48-hour turnaround time for visa applications through the global talent stream, that would make a huge difference in getting the right top talent to Canadian companies and innovators.
Thank you so much, Mr. Collins. And maintenant, je vous passe la.
And now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Blanchette-Jonca for 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to say hello to my colleagues and to the witnesses here this evening. My question is for Mr. Bergen and Mr. Schiavo. I looked at the documents you gave us having to do with the innovation strategy. It's clear by reading this, we have a very concerning labor shortage. We see this in the sector of cutting-edge technology. They also say is that they need that salaries for people in these fields have risen by 20%. What do you expect from this kind of rapid rise in salaries? Or what is behind it?
Merci, Monsieur Blanchette.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchette-Jonca. I will be answering you in English.
I think what we're seeing is when we have these major, multinational firms come into Canada, often what's happening is they are sucking up the tech talent and driving up wage inflation. But then at the same time, these multinational firms can also hire Canadians from abroad. Now that remote work is so commonplace, it very much is a global tech talent race. And so as a result, you have Canadians who are looking elsewhere for other jobs. They're looking to these major multinational firms who are able to pay, exorbitant amounts right off the bat. And it's sucking up Canadian talent. It's sucking up Canadian innovation. It's sucking up Canadian IP. And so the message is not, we need to bar these multinationals. We're happy to compete, but we need to make sure that there is enough talent so that Canadian innovation can survive. And so that comes down to, training more folks in STEM, again, upskilling, bringing in more tech talent, supporting, Canadians with student debt so that they stay in Canada. And there is that sense of loyalty. But we really need all options on the table to try to compete with that wage inflation.
Merci beaucoup, M. Schiavo.
Thank you, Mr. Schiavo. There's something I'm trying to understand, and you might be able to help us. I looked at the International Innovation Index, and we're a G7 country, and we're in 16th place. What explains the fact that Canada has not managed to perform better internationally, especially on the Innovation Index?
Thank you for that question. I'm not familiar with the index, and so having not seen it myself yet, I'll take it with a grain of salt. What I would say is I think Canada struggles to support scale-ups, and that's really why CCI was established. Was that kind of high growth, Canadian firm that is looking to scale up and build. That is really where we struggle as a country. And there's a number of reasons for that. I think Canada can do a lot more in terms of IP development and protection. In particular, one thing that CCI is very focused on in the coming weeks and months is the modernization of the SRED tax credit. SRED is obviously a massive program here in Canada. It's integral to Canadian innovators, but there are a number of recommendations that we hope to work with government on in terms of improving this program and ultimately helping it benefit Canadian innovation.
Merci beaucoup de votre réponse.
Thank you for your answer. You may not be familiar with the Global Innovation Index, but can you talk to us about progress in innovation in Canada? What can you say about that?
I'm sorry, Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca, could you just expand on that question?
Oui, je tente de savoir.
Yes, I'd like to know, how do you measure productivity in innovation in Canada? Where do we stand in terms of innovation?
Right. At this time, I don't have a clear answer for you, so I'm very happy to follow up. What I would say is, typically in speaking with our members and the ecosystem at large, from a more kind of qualitative standpoint, we like to keep our finger on the pulse of innovation here and seeing what's working for Canadian innovators and what's not. And in my conversations over the last several weeks, things like access to capital, protection of IP and access to talent remain the constant barriers. And so those are very much the focus areas for us. And I think kind of those high level measures that we are looking at constantly.
Merci beaucoup. Question pour vous.
Thank you very much. You said in the 13 recommendations by CCI to have a national week with the federal, provincial, territorial people to come up with a national strategy. What is Canada's vision right now in terms of innovation?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think that's a question that we should all be asking. I will say on behalf of CCI, we were very pleased to see several investments in innovation in budget 2022. And I think that's absolutely a step in the right direction. So that's great. But I think that's really what is missing in Canada is a unified, consolidated vision of what innovation looks like and how we reach those targets, those KPIs. And so the idea behind this national summit is not, a photo op. It's very much.
Mr. Schiavo, I'm sorry to interrupt. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Jean.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blanchet-Chonka.
I do want to recognize Mr. Bergen, who's prepared, and this is not easy with the technology, but we want to acknowledge your contribution. And with that, we will go to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here this evening. I'm going to start with Ms. Wishart. I think you made quite an eloquent plea to invest in students at all levels. I think it was made a lot of sense to me. I think we should view the funding that we put into students as an investment for the future in so many ways. You talked about how the funding provided for living expenses of master's, PhD, postdoc students as remaining stagnant over the past 20 years, I think you said. And I've got the feeling that also the number of those grants has declined as well. I'm just wondering if you could expand on that and perhaps if you know where Canada sits globally with that sort of support and why a student in their right mind would want to stay here if they were able to live more comfortably and get on with good science somewhere else in the world.
Thank you for your question, and it's nice to meet you. That's a fantastic question. I don't have numbers from a global sense. What I do have is experience chatting with friends and colleagues that have gone elsewhere or have come from elsewhere. So I speak much more on a sort of student voice level. I think Canada is one of the best countries when it comes to our NSERC funding model. I do think that there are definitely some strengths to the US system, but I do think ultimately the way that NSERC sort of funds these studentships in terms of the numbers and the amounts are quite good, but they've remained kind of falling behind. In terms of being a Canadian citizen and looking at going elsewhere, unfortunately, there are those barriers of paying international fees at other institutions. I was offered a PhD position in Australia some years ago. I did turn it down because ultimately it is more affordable to be a domestic student and pay domestic tuition. So that's one of the options that I was given, as well as just staying in the country that I'm born in. While in the US, there's maybe higher dollar amounts and the ability to hire postdocs as researchers, if you're a principal investigator on a project, for instance, you can sort of write up a grant and very easily hire a postdoc on board. However, the NSF funding model is a lot more competitive, whereas NSERC's a little bit more egalitarian in my view in that sense. However, again, it is stagnant and sort of staying behind. In terms of the postdoc awards, I believe in Canada, there's like 7,000 PhDs awarded every year. Obviously, not all of them fall under NSERC models, but there's only 180 postdoctoral fellowships offered by NSERC. They're highly competitive. And to speak to Ms. Gladew's point earlier, again, only 35% of those 180 awards go to women as well. So investing in not only the number of those awards, but increasing their value to be at a market level as well. Because once you hit the postdoc stage, it is quite luring to go someplace else where there is a little bit more money put into postdocs and some flexibility on that front. I think, again, we do a fantastic job within Canada. It's just stayed so stagnant over the years. Like you said, about 20 years we're coming up with the CGSM and the PGSD. The PDF awards were adjusted in 2015, I believe, to $45,000, but that would be close to $57,000 in today's money, which by the time you finished 3 degrees, including a PhD, making only $57,000 a year, even if we adjusted it, is still quite low. And so
can I
globally, I think.
Sorry, can I just jump in and before I run out of time and ask you about tuition? You mentioned the difference between international and domestic tuition, but here in Canada, we've seen just a steadily rising tuitions at all levels over the last 30 years as government funding for universities and colleges has declined. And I'm just wondering how, if there's something better we can do there. In my previous life, I would go to biological stations around the world, and I would meet European students who were there volunteering in the summer because they didn't have to pay tuition. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on what some sort of break in tuition might allow us to keep students here.
Absolutely. Some kind of like a cap to tuition, or at least, when a student starts their program, perhaps capping it for the length of their program as well, because in the time I've started my PhD, my tuition has risen constantly year after year. I wouldn't have expected it to rise as much as it has when I started. So even just locking it into that value for the length of a program, I think would serve a long way. Unfortunately, in Canada, and I'm speaking from a biology perspective, visiting biological stations and being involved in long-term research myself, many students are volunteering in the summers to get that experience. They're still paying these increasing tuition costs. And so there just isn't the flexibility in some of those grants to be able to even pay the volunteers. So people are kind of stretching themselves thin, going completely broke to get the experience to be competitive, and really paying that cost in terms of their financial stability, and then what options they kind of have by the end of their program.
Thanks very much. I think I'm out of time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cannings. We have now completed the first round, and we will go to the second round of questions. And to our witnesses, you really do have an interesting group of people here. So we'll go to round 2. This is a 5-minute round, and we will begin with Mr. Williams.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I'm going to first ask my questions to Mr. Burgin and Mr. Schiavo. Thank you very much for attending today. We had representatives to the University of Waterloo and for a formal report who stated that we see as much as 75% attrition in our software engineering grads, which is really concerning. I know when we talk about retention, what are your recommendations to keep more of those grads in Canada and not leave to the U.S.?
Yeah, thank you for that, and that's a great question. We are absolutely, seeing the exact same thing, and so one of the problems is, again, coming back to those high wages and just the global competitive nature. Retention is incredibly important, and so some of the recommendations that we have put forward include, not touching and not messing with employee stock options. These are an important tool for innovators to help build ownership of employees, to help retain employees, and so we are very happy to see those stay as they are. Because they are incredibly important. But beyond that, some recommendations in terms of supporting students with student debt. So, moving the 6-month grace period for federal loans to 12 months and making that permanent. This was something we saw during the pandemic. And so we'd love to see this continue and carry on. But then also one of our more kind of innovative proposals comes from a similar scheme that we've seen in the United States, which is there a role for the federal government to support businesses that are helping their employees pay off student debt? If they are working, of course, for a Canadian company. And so it's another kind of interesting retention tool. I think what you'll notice throughout all of these recommendations is that they're very ambitious. And so we don't claim to have all the answers. We're very open to other ideas, but I think the federal government needs to take a serious look at employee retention within the tech space.
Okay, thank you. Now, are those things that the U.S. are doing right now, are they currently putting those initiatives in place, and that's why they're taking these students? Why are they taking that talent from Canada? What is the number one or number two reason?
Well, I think it's the nature of the global labor market. Again, being able to work remotely means there's a lot more options on the table. So that's a huge factor. Again, when you are up against the Metas of the world and the Amazons of the world, it is hard for Canadian SMEs, Canadian scale-ups to compete with those wages. And so, if you're a new grad and you're looking at a $200,000 or $300,000 starting salary, it's very tempting. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not wages that create wealth, it's IP. And it's by generating Canadian companies and Canadian entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And so, our message is let's have Canadians working for Canadian companies who are creating that innovation here at home.
Thank you. Of the 13 recommendations, I know you've given a couple of priorities. Which ones do you think can be done by the end of 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the key ones I think would be committing to a national summit on skilled labor. This is a nonpartisan exercise. We would love to see all sectors, colleges and universities, of course, innovators and entrepreneurs, and the federal government as well as provinces at the table to really develop, capacity building and to apply a talent lens. That's a very easy win. I think beyond that, we'd love to see some pilot projects in terms of a high potential tech visa and a digital nomad strategy. These are strategies or visas that have either been adopted by other jurisdictions around the world or are being considered. And they very much speak to the idea of increasing labor density of the skilled labor market. So bringing more tech talent to Canada, even if there isn't that concrete job offer, that concrete visa, with the idea that they'd then be able to work for Canadian companies and integrate more into our economy and our ecosystem.
Thank you very much. And I know my past colleague asked that you're starting to expand on a national vision for innovation. If you can, and this is all to our witnesses, if you can submit anything in writing that you don't have a chance to answer today to the committee, we'd be able to put that in a report. My last question really quickly for Mr. McKenzie. Can you just let us know, how are you engaging local employers through the college system for job gaps? And really quickly, and if again miss you, you can please submit that to answer in writing.
Thanks very much. So we work directly with about 2,000 employers in the Hamilton community. Some of them are very comprehensive, can give us lists of employees that they need out over the next couple of years based on retirements and growth. Some of them not quite as sophisticated. We have a program called City School, which we will customize the credential to the employer. So large ones like DeFasco or much smaller employers. And we often seek out people who are in underrepresented or marginalized communities, and we'll offer them free education through the City School program with an employer and a job
Mr.
takeout.
McCurley, I'm sorry to interrupt. Perhaps, Mr. Williams, you might like a written response.
Yes, please, for that one and for the last one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to both of you. And now we will go to Monsieur Lauzon for 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for being here this evening, as well as thank the witnesses who are helping us with our study. My first question is for Mr. McCurley. Your situation, where you are at Mohawk College, you're close to the American border, and you talked a lot about foreign students, but also about retaining labor, retaining workers. What does your organization do to retain these people? And what do you do to work with people who aren't very far from the American border?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We have limited opportunities to retain students once they graduate. We work with employers, obviously, to try to get job offers, local job offers in students' hands before graduation. On average, right now, our students would get 2.3 job offers each before graduation. So it's the highest it's ever been. But students still leave for a variety of reasons: better pay and other opportunities. Remote work, as was mentioned by one of the other witnesses, plays into this right now. We just had a a student graduate and immediately go to work for a Swiss company, staying in Hamilton, but working remotely. So it's getting tougher to retain students domestically when they have opportunities globally, some of which might be higher paying jobs. But we do try to work directly with employers.
What recommendation could you make to us specifically? What do you think the government could do to help you more in keeping these students here?
Yeah, one idea might be we might look at a situation where we subsidize tuition for domestic students and on the proviso that they stay and work locally or at least in Canada. And if they did that, they wouldn't have to pay back the student loan. Other countries are looking at that type of opportunity to try to keep down the level of debt for students, but also to entice them to pick a job locally or at least nationally rather than internationally upon graduation.
Vous avez quand même une clientèle rapide.
But quickly, the people you're dealing with come from rural areas in certain rural communities. Are there any issues with these people who come from remote rural regions?
So our students would come from primarily urban regions around the Golden Horseshoe, although some would come from rural communities. There are always issues in terms of access to education when you have to travel. But the last 2 years, we solved a lot of those by offering remote programs. So I'm not sure if that's what you were getting at, but the issues are actually less now than they were before the pandemic.
Yeah, okay. Une question pour Madame.
And now I have a question for Ms. Wishart. In a study that you co-edited or you co-wrote, you talked about an essential, the responsibility for nuclear energy. You said that you talked about the effect of radiation on songbirds. How can a study like yours allow us to improve our technology? I'd like you to explain, please.
Thank you. And thank you for looking into my my research past. That study came out about 11 years ago now and has a little bit of uptake. And part of the reason that we study things like the effects of ionizing radiation damage on wildlife is to understand the impact that we have of technology that can advance human interests, but maintaining the health of the ecosystems around it. And highlighting some of those issues in that particular study, one species typically is found more urban compared to the other species that had a little bit more damage. We can better not only advance the technology, but also decide where to put those sorts of technologies in the landscape so that we can minimize the effect on the environment.
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur Lauzon.
Thank you, Mr. Lauzon.
And colleagues, I'm cognizant of the time. To be fair, 1 minute pour Monsieur Blanchet-Jean.
So 1 minute for Mr. Blanchet-Jonca and 1 minute for Mr. Cannings.
Monsieur Blanchet-Jean.
Mr. Blanchet-Jonca? Yes. 1 minute, please. Well, thank you. I will continue with Mr. Bergen and Mr. Scabio from Canadian Innovators. Now, what do you think is most urgent for us to make sure that we can attract talent and cultivate talent, as you mentioned in your report? And how can we retain these people?
Yeah, a lot in that question, but thank you for that question. Very important. I would say getting talent here as soon as possible. And so looking at those innovative programs that I mentioned, the high-tech visa, the digital nomad strategy, digitizing the entirety of IRCC, and the global talent stream so that the process is smoother, ensuring that there are stronger pathways to permanent residency for folks who come here with that talent. But the reality is we need it now. now. And so the sooner we can get that done, the better, while also looking at things like upskilling and capacity building.
Wow, that was impressive to both of you. Thank you. And if we could now go to Mr. Canning's 1 minute, please.
Well, thank you. I was going to dive into visas more broadly, but I think I'll just go straight to Mr. McCurley and ask about student visas. As MPs, we all deal with immigration issues and often taking years to get visas with students. It must be much more urgent to get that visa in a timely manner. I'm just wondering if you could give us some examples of visa issues that you've encountered at Mohawk College and how that can be fixed.
Thank you very much. So we have a large number of students who would be waiting months for their visas. And so I see the yellow card. So we anything that we can do to speed that up obviously is going to be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. And with that, colleagues, we'd really like to thank all our witnesses tonight. We are grateful for your time, your expertise, your joining us, and that you've all prepared so much to come. So we thank you. We're going to suspend briefly to get ready for our second panel. Thank you and good night. Colleagues, I'm going to welcome everyone back for panel 2. Welcome to everyone who's joining us tonight. We are thankful for your time and your effort, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. So this will be the second panel tonight. We have Dr. Sean Koo, a postdoctoral fellow, Université de Montréal. From the Canadian Glycomics Network, we have Elizabeth Nanik, Chief Executive Officer, Karima Escobar, the Board Chair, and Warren Wakarchuk, Scientific Director. I apologize if I've mispronounced, and you'll please let us know. And from the Endometriosis Network Canada, we have Matthew Leonardi and Philippa Bridge-Cook, the Chair. Welcome to you all. We will go through your statements. You will have 5 minutes. At the 4.5-minute mark, I will raise a yellow card so you know you have 30 seconds left. And we'll begin now with Sean Koo for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My key message tonight is simple. Researchers might love making discoveries, but the way to attract and retain talented researchers is to improve their pay and working conditions. There are institutional and workplace culture issues as well, but job availability, salary, and security are the most important. All over the world, whether it's in North America or Australia, where I'm from, there is an abundance of talented researchers. Somewhere between 80 and 90% of PhD holders will not find permanent jobs in academia, which means there are 5 to 10 times as many PhDs as universities need. This has allowed Canadian funders and institutions to leave wages stagnant, but Canada's academic institutions are not just competing with other countries with talent, but with other industries who are offering us salaries that are double or triple those in Canada's academies and with better working conditions. My perspective is that of a foreign postdoctoral researcher. I completed my PhD in Australia before moving to Montreal in 2017. Canada was attractive, both as a scientific leader in my field and as a great place to live. While not every postdoc can be retained, in my case, I felt that 5 years overseas was enough. It would be relatively easy for Canada to retrain researchers like myself by giving us jobs with decent pay and conditions. Good working conditions start with a bit of security. While 1 or 2 year contracts have become the norm for early career researchers in much of the world, short-term contracts prevent researchers from planning both their lives and their research. Research projects have gotten longer and more complex, so short contracts restrict the kinds of questions that can be answered or the expertise that can be developed. It also prevents researchers from planning their lives. If a top researcher wants to settle in Canada, it's hard for them to think about buying a house or starting a family if they're on a 1 year contract. If you give researchers more secure contracts, we'll be able to spend less time doing employment and immigration paperwork and more time making discoveries. There's also the issue of poor stagnant pay. Canadian postdoc pay is so low that I earned more as an Australian PhD student with some casual teaching roles than I did in Canada. On top of that, every year Canada gave me a pay cut in real terms because my Canadian postdoc salary wasn't indexed for inflation, nor did it rise with experience. In Australia, PhD scholarships and academic salaries are indexed annually. From 2004 to 2021, Australian PhD scholarships rose over 54%, while in the rest of the economy, Canadian wages grew 62%. However, Canada's federal research student stipends and fellowships had zero growth, and senior postdocs with years of experience are earning the same as fresh graduates. Stagnant wages were definitely a push factor in my decision to leave Canada. If Canada wants to retain talent, it needs to index scholarships and stipends from undergraduate summer scholarships to postdoctoral fellowships to keep pace with inflation and wages. Another push factor is the ambiguous classification of postdocs. A postdoc employed on their supervisor's grant is an employee, but if you win a fellowship, the university classifies you as a non-employee. You do the same job, you work there, but you're not entitled to things that normal employees get. I know that at Concordia University, for example, this means that externally funded postdocs need to fight for access to everything from an institutional email account to remote access to their own data to filing expenses for reimbursement. And of course, being a non-employee doesn't mean you get any student benefits. While postdocs are sometimes called students, there's no discounted health insurance or transport. And when I've won external prize money, my university has classified it as salary and made all the usual employee deductions. I'd also like to touch on issues of research culture and integrity. Hearing about institutions that bury misconduct allegations and let dodgy scientists collect federal funding on the back of fake data damages public trust in research morale. After all, if a Canada research chair goes to someone dishonest, that means a talented researcher has missed out. It also leaves a huge mess for honest researchers to clean up. Providing more support to institutions to improve culture and prevent and respond to misconduct would lift this drag on research productivity. For example, financial rewards for researchers who are implementing more transparent, reproducible research processes would help Canadian researchers work more effectively. Canada is already a leader in open access to research. For example, Simon Fraser University's Public Knowledge Project develops free software that powers thousands of scholarly communication platforms worldwide. But there is room for Canada to do more to reward researchers who are accelerating discovery through more open and transparent science. In my experience, a love of research and discovery just isn't enough to keep talented researchers in the job. The vast majority of PhDs I know have now left research for better salaries, job security, and an environment that allows for work-life balance. That's why my message is simple: to attract and retain talented researchers, improve pay and working conditions. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you're curious, upon leaving Canada and leaving academic research, yes, I did double my salary.
Thank you very much, Dr. Koo. The next I will go to is to the Endometriosis Network of Canada for 5 minutes, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Thank you to you and the Standing Committee on Science and Research for the invitation to present today. I'm a gynecologist and PhD scientist at McMaster University in Hamilton with a clinical and research focus on endometriosis. I am an early career researcher, having only returned from training and working in Australia in 2020. I am a volunteer with the Endometriosis Network Canada and EndoAct Canada. I will now pass you on to my co-presenter to introduce herself.
You're on mute. You're on mute. There you go. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry. Good evening, Madam Speaker and committee. I am an endometriosis patient advocate and PhD scientist. My long journey with endometriosis inspired me to become one of the founding board members of the Endometriosis Network Canada. I'm currently the chair of the board of that organization and the co-chair of EndoAct Canada. Although I started having endometriosis symptoms as a teenager, it took me over 20 years to get a diagnosis. And during that time, I suffered from debilitating symptoms. This caused numerous changes in the course of my life, including deciding not to pursue a career in academics after my PhD. Almost 30 years after my symptoms started, I was finally able to get effective treatment and regain my quality of life. We are speaking to you today because there is a crisis in endometriosis care in Canada, with significant gaps in our biomedical, clinical, and health system services. Endometriosis is an inflammatory disease that causes debilitating pain, infertility, and other symptoms that affect the whole body, leading to significant impacts on individuals, families, and society. There is no definitive cause or known cure for endometriosis. The disease is managed with specialized surgical care, other medical care, and multidisciplinary services. Aligned with the endometriosis research priorities published in leading medical journal The Lancet in 2017, we will describe 3 main health research domains with inadequate research and talent deficiencies and some proposed solutions. Domain 1. There is a limited understanding of the cause of endometriosis from a basic research point of view, leading to limited therapeutic options. This presents an opportunity to attract top talent, as the enigmatic nature of endometriosis is incredibly attractive to scientists and clinician scientists alike. Domain 2. There is a lengthy delay in diagnosis of 5 to 11 years. One reason for this is that there is low awareness of the disease among the general public and healthcare providers, which is rooted in historic and systematic dismissal of women's pain. In addition, medical tools that would allow early identification and diagnosis of endometriosis are lacking. There is an opportunity to transform the lives of people with endometriosis through research investments that could decrease the diagnostic delay. Domain 3. In addition to long waits for specialized surgical care, the current array of treatments is inadequate and leaves most people with endometriosis continuing to have symptoms with tremendous impact on their daily lives. Many of the 1 million Canadians with endometriosis may be interested in pursuing career goals in research and innovation, but are unable to do so because of inadequate treatment. I personally faced this situation.
Patients, clinicians, and researchers are creating change for endometriosis in Canada. For example, Minister Don Davies put forward Motion M52, requesting a national action plan for endometriosis. In addition to supporting M52, we would like to propose some solutions for aspects of the endometriosis crisis that pertain to acquisition and retention of top talent and support for research and innovation. Solution number 1, support the formation of endometriosis centers of excellence, where interdisciplinary research teams can work together to address the gaps that exist. These should be developed in established centers in Canada to leverage existing institutional supports. This would enable talent to reach their potential and ensure Canada rises as the leader in endometriosis research and innovation, while also improving clinical care. Solution number 2, we must start to distinguish gynecologic diseases, including endometriosis, from pregnancy or newborn-related diseases within academia and research. Gynecology is currently like a little sibling to the big sibling of obstetrics. Although women spend most of their lives avoiding pregnancy, obstetrics often takes priority. This lack of prioritization is not only unfair to those who suffer from gynecologic diseases, but also pushes any interested researchers away from working in this area. Solution number 3, improve disparities in research funding. As outlined in our submitted brief, endometriosis affects 10% of women, as well as transgender and gender diverse individuals. Compared to the other diseases with far lower prevalence rates, endometriosis receives a staggeringly low number of grants and proportionally low funding per affected Canadian. Thank you so much, and we look forward to questions and answers.
We thank both of you for your presentation, and we are sorry, Ms. Bridgecook, for your pain, and we're glad you found some help and assistance. We will now go to the Canadian Glycomics Network, and we welcome you, and we look forward to hearing from you for 5 minutes.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, committee members, thank you for your invitation. I'm addressing you from the traditional Treaty 6 territories and Métis territory of Region 4 in Alberta.
In Glycomics Network, also known as Glyconet. Joining me today are Ms. Karima S. Sabar, our board chair, and Dr. Warren Wakachuk, our scientific director and lead scientist in Glycomics. As you may know, Karima is also the chair of the ICED Health and Bioscience Economic Strategy Table. Glyconet was created in 2015 through the Networks of Centers of Excellence program and is focused on glycomics research, development, and innovation. We are currently one of the top 3 leaders in the field in the world. Glycomics is a study of sugars in all living things, including humans, animals, viruses, bacteria, and plants. The study of these sugars has enabled us to develop solutions to leading diseases in humans and animals, and it has also translated into substantial health and economic outcomes. For example, 5 of the top 10 protein drugs on the market today are glycomics related and have a combined annual revenue of $75 billion. Glyconet has mobilized over 175 research groups across Canada and 160 partners from academia and industry to advance glycomics research and commercialization. Our leadership has helped us attract and retain top talent from academia and industry, fostering research excellence and partnerships. Since 2015, this has resulted in total investment of $90 million, equally matched from government and industry for Canadian-led research and development. Our partner universities have been able to attract talented researchers who now hold prominent positions, including a Canada Excellence Research Chair. GlycoNet has also provided training opportunities for over 550 trainees. Our graduates have populated our startup companies and Canadian SMEs, continued on to work in academia and government, and have been recruited by multinational companies. Thanks to government and industry support to date and GlycoNet's unique platform, we have been able to translate innovation to commercial outcomes and develop a new sector of the bioeconomy. Continued support will be necessary to maintain our leadership in this field and attract top talent, as Karima will now outline.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'd first like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from the ancestral territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam peoples here in Vancouver. And it's my pleasure to present to you today. To pick up from where Elizabeth left off, to ensure a truly sustainable and optimized platform in glycomics through GlycoNet, the full economic benefit of GlycoNet to be realized, we need sustained public-private support on an ongoing basis. Continued sustained joint public and private funding is critical to retaining and building the talent we need to capitalize on innovation, commercialization, and the competitive advantage that we have in glycomics. As Elizabeth mentioned, glycomics is one of the leading fields in Canada, and we rank amongst the top 3 in the world. At the heart of Canada's glycomic ecosystem, GlycoNet is training the next generation of glycomics innovators, enabling talent attraction and retention in a new and existing companies, as well as traditional and global companies that are based in Canada, biotech and big pharma. Without top talent in this growing field, our country risks losing its opportunity to capitalize on the glycomics research, innovation, commercialization, and investment, and therefore on the economic benefit. Talent is the new oil, and it certainly is no different for us in the glycomics area. This multi-stream approach has already demonstrated the economic benefits of new jobs and made in Canada solutions in the areas of health, clean tech, and agriculture to support our innovation economy. Canada's investment as a percentage of GDP has declined over the years in R&D and innovation, sitting now at 1.7% versus the OECD average of 2.7% versus the 4% that top-tier countries are investing. Canada is slipping in innovation output and productivity in spite of our high quality of science and discovery. So it becomes very important to keep investing in our strengths and the platforms that we are leading in the world. The opportunity for Canada to firmly establish itself as a world leader in glycomics is very real, and its potential impact to Canadian health and to the Canadian economy very significant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. We thank you both for your contributions tonight. We thank all our witnesses for joining us, and now our excellent colleagues have questions they'd like to ask you. We will begin with a 6-minute round, and tonight we begin with Ms. Gladue.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses for your testimony tonight. I have my first question for Mr. Koo. So you talked about the salary differential. Is a 4-year contract acceptable? And would you consider that in addition to some salary increase that you would be able to deduct your student debt from your taxes?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, I think a 4-year contract would be fantastic. That would be between double and 4 times as many as most of the contracts that I had in Canada. It would be competitive with winning fellowships elsewhere. For example, in Australia, a grant might be 3 years or an investigator award is 5. So a 4-year contract would be very competitive. As for tax deduction of student debt, I think that people would probably be quite happy with that. I don't have any personal experience to relate to that, but I think that that kind of incentive would definitely encourage people to stay in the field.
Excellent. My next question is for Ms. Sabar. So can you describe how you think the combination of public and private funding could help secure more expertise to do glycomics research?
Yes, thank you for that question. Well, the GlycoNet, for example, is a network connecting the scientists, the entrepreneurs, the investment community, the students, everybody. It's a end-to-end network, and the objective of having public-private partnership, both from a funding perspective, but also from a training and enabling perspective, is that the jobs, often many of the jobs are in industry, some of the jobs are in academia. We want to ensure that we have talent here that is anchored and long-term in building this ecosystem and a sustainable ecosystem. So there must be jobs in both sides. Industry benefits, so does the public sector. We already have public-private funding, and I think Elizabeth referred to the 90 million that we've got has been matched equally by the private sector.
Excellent. This is great. I'm going to share my time with Mr. Tucker, so I'll let him take it away.
Thank you very much. I'd like to carry on a little bit, Elizabeth, on you're talking about the 90 million in funding from private and or matched private funding from government. In those arrangements, who owns the science? Does the partner that provides 50% of the dollars to do the research would own 50% of the science?
No, so the science is owned by the universities. Mm-hmm. So we work with the universities. So the research, it's a grant. So the grant would go to the university, and the scientist is doing the research. If it is IP generated, it will belong to the university or the researchers, depending on the arrangements that they have at a particular university. The company may have a chance to have an option to license the technology. So it's not owned by the company.
And we were talking about in 2015, you got going. So is there other revenue coming into your organization from those investments if you own the research and the IP on that research?
Okay, so this is an excellent question. So in 2015, we were a network of centers of excellence, and we were normally scheduled to have funding for 15 years. So we didn't want to put a condition that could impede research and innovation. So in between, the NC program was terminated, and we have developed now a program to try to get return on investment. So this program is existing now. We do have some percentage on some technologies that are being licensed. The revenue will be coming in the next few years.
Okay, so we talked about different increases would obviously help your research. Is there anything on the regulatory side or the patent side or the legal framework in Canada that would encourage more research, that there's any red tape to get out of the way?
Karima, do you want to answer this question?
Yes, I'll be happy to. Well, we have some challenging IP policies. It's a potpourri of policies across universities, and one could do a whole PhD study on that. it is challenging from institution to institution. Some are more progressive, some are not. But it's, IP should always be inventor driven. So again, it's in the sharing and the participation, which is important. And we're starting to see that. In the life sciences and in biotech, it's a long life cycle. So it's a longer return period. But on other areas of agriculture, environment, climate change, these things happen a little bit faster. Again, I can't give you one single answer because it really varies from institution to institution.
Thank you kindly for all the presenters tonight. That was very helpful in our work that we do, and I appreciate your effort to increase our understanding of science.
Thank you so much to Ms. Gladue and Mr. Tucker. And now we will go to Mr. Collins for 6 minutes, please.
Yep, thanks, Madam Chairman. If I could start with Dr. Leonardi and Dr. Bridge-Cook from McMaster. I was very intrigued with the suggestion of the support for the Centers of Excellence concept that they have submitted to the committee. And I'm interested to understand how that would work in its implementation, in its form. Through you.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the invitation again to be here tonight. Centers of Excellence in healthcare are not a new concept in Canada. They are established already in certain health domains, including cancer, bariatric surgery, and mental health. The concept of endometriosis centers of excellence is built on some of the foundational work that others have already done to establish a network of individuals with clinical expertise, but also academic research expertise on a topic. The goal of a center of expertise is really fourfold. The first domain is to improve the quality of care and the patient experience. The second is to improve population health. Third, to lower the cost of care because it is being done correctly the first time. And fourth, to improve the healthcare professional experience, which speaks to this purpose of the committee tonight around the retention of talent. In Canada, being a gynecologist is quite challenging due to a number of barriers. And staying in Canada can be a challenge, particularly those who want to maintain a strong research interest. There are really not very many centers around the country that are particularly supportive of research in the domain of endometriosis and research in gynecology in general. So the Center of Excellence would really support that concept as well. Beyond the actual center, we would need to build communities of practice around that to support the various regions around the centers of excellence, which should be established at academic institutions with healthcare affiliation.
Thanks, Dr. Leonardi. Can I ask a follow-up on that? The report that we'll deal with here with top talent will drive policy decisions and funding. So what does the funding model look like to support the concept that you just highlighted?
At present, healthcare is provincially funded, and gynecologic healthcare is not particularly prioritized. This is something that various institutions individually are trying to advocate for, including my institution at Hamilton Health Science and McMaster University, for which I'm incredibly grateful that they are making those strides. Really, the idea around healthcare funding is provincial, but the idea of federal funding for research is how the academics who will drive forward clinical science and basic science in particular, as well as the social science, they will be able to work effectively in their institutions collaboratively in an interdisciplinary model. So it's partially healthcare provincial as well as federal through grant agencies.
Madam Chair, I'm going to share the rest of my time with my colleague, Ms. Diab.
Thank you very much. I want to continue with that, and I want to ask Dr. Bridge-Cook. I've had constituents that have contacted me in my office since I became an MP, 7-8 months ago, that have this disease and have sort of educated me about that. Ms. Bridge-Cook, can you talk about your experience for the committee? And this is on public record. I would like you to share whatever you're able to share with us.
Sure. Thank you very much for that question. So I started having symptoms of endometriosis as a teenager, but because there's very little menstrual education in schools about what's normal, I didn't really know that my symptoms were abnormal, and that's the case for many people with endometriosis. They're just not aware that the pain that they experience with their periods, other pain, pelvic pain throughout the month, gastrointestinal symptoms, bladder symptoms, fatigue, these things can all be a part of endometriosis. And as teenagers, you don't know what's normal. There's a big taboo and stigma associated with talking about any symptoms that are associated with menstruation. So that sort of prevents teenagers from coming forward, which, I never really spoke about that. When I was a teenager, I went to university, I started graduate school, I was doing my graduate school I was doing my PhD in medical genetics, so I was in a biomedical field, and I still had never heard the word endometriosis, which is shocking in retrospect, but kind of not, because it's just not a topic that's generally understood or talked about. So, during graduate school, I sort of realized that being debilitated for 1 week a month wasn't something that could move forward with me as an academic researcher. So I sort of sought out other career options for myself. After I was married, I wanted to have children, and my husband and I started trying to conceive, and I ended up having recurrent miscarriages. So I had 6 miscarriages with no known cause at the time. I still did not have an endometriosis diagnosis, although I'd started describing my symptoms to doctors. I saw 5 different gynecologists. Nobody gave me a diagnosis of endometriosis. I continued having miscarriages. Nobody could explain why. And eventually I had a very large endometrioma, which is a lesion of endometriosis on the ovary. And that was visible by ultrasound. And that's how I ultimately got in to have surgery, confirm the diagnosis of endometriosis, and treat the endometriosis at the same time.
So Miss Bridge-Cook, I want to really thank you for coming and sharing that with us publicly, because it will go a long way to help many women and many families, I say, across the country.
Thank you, Ms. Diab.
So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Diab. And Ms. Bridge-Cook, I think everyone here, our heart goes out to you, all of us, and we're just grateful for your courage and for coming and sharing your story and fighting for others. With that, I will go to maintenant je vous passe la parole.
Now, I will give the floor to Mr. Blanchet-Jonca for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I would like to say hello to our witnesses this evening and thank them for having shared their experience with us. I'd like to continue along the lines of retaining talent in Canada. Now, I'd like to say, sir, that you, Mr. Koo, I'm glad that we have someone who shared his experience, his career path, and I'm sorry that you felt you had to leave Canada and Quebec. I'd like to know from you, what should the federal government change to avoid the kind of situation you were in, which encouraged you to leave the country?
Thank you very much for the question. I think that the key things to change at a federal level are to improve the availability of funding and to improve the salaries that are offered to postdoctoral fellows. I think that there are also things that can be done around immigration to make, for example, the renewal of a work permit faster and easier to do. For example, at the moment, the work permit renewal is basically the same as a full application. So it takes a substantial amount of time to be processed and involves a significant cost, not just for the researcher, but for the institution that's hiring us in as foreign postdoctoral or foreign temporary workers. Other than that, the main thing, as I said in my opening statement, is to increase salaries and improve working conditions. Thanks.
Merci beaucoup de votre réponse.
Thank you very much for your answer. And in your opinion, what are the main obstacles that students run into when they want to stay on?
I think that there are a few obstacles. I think the biggest one, of course, is job security. It's very difficult to continue all of your 20s and 30s on 1 and 2 year contracts, not knowing where you'll be or what you'll be doing in a few years. There is a constant interest in alternative career paths, which can have great benefits for the rest of the economy because skilled talent is needed not just in the academy, but also in business and industry. But for a lot of young researchers, that is a very difficult thing and a constant source of anxiety. So job availability is a big one. Watching all of your non-academic friends and acquaintances be able to settle down and buy houses and have families and things like that is quite difficult for a lot of young researchers. And that's one of the push factors that I think keeps people leaving academia and research.
Très intéressant, merci beaucoup.
That's very interesting, thank you. In your opinion, what could the federal government do to assume its responsibility and encourage jobs, employability for graduates in Canada?
I think that there are a few things that graduates struggle with in terms of finding jobs after a PhD or other graduate research program. For example, one is knowing what you can do. So I think that if the federal government were to provide some more support to institutions, to provide more career training to graduate students, then they would be better able to identify alternative career paths and also to see how they can adapt their training during their PhDs or masters to better prepare them for those alternative careers.
Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you very much. There was a report published last year by the Council of Canadian Academies. It said there weren't enough people with doctorates for employers. And we know that people with PhDs, this is a labor force that is truly educated. What do you think about this? What do you think about the fact that we can't help these competent, educated people to find a job and to find one effectively?
I don't fully agree that there is a shortage of PhDs. I think that there is an oversupply of PhDs, and I think that the difficulty is matching the talent to the jobs. Because as I said in my opening statement, between 80 and 90% of PhD holders will not find permanent jobs in academia. And that, I think, partially is because the vast majority of people who do PhDs want to find a job in academia. So there is this process that I think a lot of PhDs and postdocs go through where they learn that, maybe a job in academia isn't the be-all and end-all of my career, and that there are other equally worthwhile and rewarding careers outside of the academy. So I think that integrating this into our training programs is something that is really important and something that could better help people match their expectations and their job searches as they develop during their PhDs and through their early postdoctoral years.
Merci beaucoup des précisions. Monsieur Ko,
Thank you very much. Mr. Koo, if the government were to implement something, if it were to put something in place that could encourage you to come back to Canada or to Quebec, what would your priorities be?
I think it would be hard to, because in my case, the reason why I'm back in Australia is mostly personal. It's to be near family and it's to be near, and to be in my country of birth. But I think that a permanent job with good pay would be right up there. And I think that's what I have now in Australia. So I think a permanent job with good pay and a visa to go with it would be what would attract me back to Canada.
Thank you so much, Dr. Koo, and merci, Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca. We will now go, dear colleagues, to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and thanks again to this set of witnesses. I'm going to stay with Dr. Koo and drill down on some of these, I guess they're pretty much purely monetary in many ways issues. You mentioned that, the private sector does outcompete the academic sector, and I recall when I was, working summers as a biological, student helper, being shocked to find out that the geological prospectors that I met, students like me, working for the summer with private companies in the Yukon mountains were making like 6 times what I was making. So it was, I thought very seriously of going into geology at the time. But one thing we haven't talked about, we've heard about the grad student funding that NSERC and other of the tri-councils provides, and the postdoc funding. But I think you've looked at some of the funding that is provided for these jobs between years when students are trying to get experience that will be valuable in the years to come. And I'm just reading, I think, something that you put together that said the NSERC undergraduate programs for these summer jobs, even after the university kicks in their share, they're barely, if at all, getting minimum wage. Is that what you found?
Thank you. And yes, that is exactly what I found. I think if you do the math on how much a summer scholarship would pay a student and how much we would have them work, and be assured that we do work them hard because we want them to get the best out of their experience. But in terms of the pay that they would get relative to the effort, I think it would be at or below the minimum wage. I think it would be in the order of $11 something per hour, which would be less than the proposed $15 minimum wage.
Okay, so things haven't really gotten much better since the 1970s when I was doing that. So that's very interesting. I mean, I would see a lot of students maybe thinking twice about staying even at that level. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe, since you have this experience both in Australia and Canada, compare, some of the, we hear about rising tuition costs. Every year tuitions seem to go up, and yet the funding for a grad student stays the same. So as you said, you kind of you don't get a raise, you get a pay cut every year. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe talk to the tuition fee side of things, how Canada compares with the rest of the world in that regard.
I can only really speak to the Australian aspect of how Canada compares, but I can say that in Australia for domestic PhD students, there are no tuition fees. So there is no question of whether there will be an extra cost imposed on students. For international students, there are fees, but for the majority of students who are studying or completing their PhDs in Australia, my understanding is that they would apply for and usually get an international fee remission scholarship. So the fees are there on paper, but the majority of students who would be successful in winning a scholarship would probably also get their fees waived or funded by a scholarship. So they wouldn't really need to pay anything there. So in terms of Canada charging fees for postgraduate research, it does seem to be a little out of step with what we would get in Australia.
And does that also apply to like a master's students, or is there tuition fees for master's programs in Australia?
I believe that there are, but I'm not entirely sure of the situation for master's students. I think that they might have some of the similar kinds of scholarships because master's is a bit more complex because there are masters by coursework and masters by research, and so the variety of degrees on offer is different. So there will be also a variety of different, scholarship settings.
Right. Okay. And just to reiterate or clarify, you said that in Australia, the funding that grad students can apply for in postdocs has been going up year by year over the last 20 years, unlike Canada?
Yes, that's correct. For PhD students in Australia, the funding is provided by the federal government, and the PhD scholarships are indexed every year. And you can look up the historical PhD student stipends on the Department of Education website, and they go back many, many decades, and you can see that they've been going up regularly for the whole time. As for postdoctoral fellows, the funding or the salary is set by the institution that employs them. So as a postdoctoral fellow in Australia, you're covered by the enterprise agreement, just the same as any other employee of the university. And so your pay is indexed according to that enterprise agreement. So you will not have any issue with your pay decreasing over time. And hopefully, if the pay rate that's been agreed with the employees goes up, then you will beat inflation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Cannings, for your questions. And now, colleagues, we will go to a second round of questions. This is for 5 minutes each. And Mr. Soroka, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you to Madam Chair and to all of the witnesses. Boy, we've asked a lot of good questions tonight because I've taken a lot off my list already, I'll tell you. But my first question is to Dr. Lenardi and Dr. Bridge Cook. Now, you had spoken more about how the education of women or their lack of it, or even the tendency not to talk about, severe periods or something else that was affecting women to have the systemic pain. What can we do to improve the education so more women actually find out about this or more knowledgeable about I'm going to say it wrong, endometriosis. Endometriosis. Boy, seems easier than that.
So I think that it's very important for there to be education about this in schools. And obviously that education is a provincial responsibility, but I think where the federal responsibility's role in that is providing a leadership role in terms of, for example, we've been advocating for a national action plan for endometriosis from the federal government that would state that, endometriosis is a problem. These are the problems with it. For example, lack of awareness is a problem. And to provide that leadership like other countries have done, for example, in Australia, where they actually made an apology to people with endometriosis and said, we apologize for the neglect of your disease. It would be really important for the federal government to provide that leadership role that could then translate into more specific improvements through, for example, provincial governments for funding for education in schools.
Thank you for that. I hope that does come about a lot quicker because I don't think people should be suffering like you've had to gone through. So I feel sorry for what you've had to go through to find out you have this disease. So,
thank you.
With this, I'll go on to Dr. Koo. You had spoke about the integrity in research and the foundations that can be integrated in order to ensure the credibility of data in research and improve social trust and moral. Could you give us a bit more explanation on that, please?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for the question. There are a lot of movements in science right now to make data more open, which gives transparency and allows other people to check it. Because for the most part in science, we operate on a trust principle where if a paper is published, the data set underlying that doesn't actually get reviewed while the paper is reviewed. And that doesn't get assessed at any time after publication necessarily either. So at the moment, there is a reform movement or multiple reform movements within science to make it more open and transparent and to share these data sets more publicly at an earlier stage. And by supporting scientists who are doing this, that would make their work more open and more readily assessed by other scientists and more closely scrutinized. That will ensure, we hope, that the science that is produced will be more reliable.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I've also got a question then, do you think that, I know you spoke about how, salaries, contracts, and livable wages, but even incentivizing immigration to obtaining like permanent residency, do you think that would encourage researchers to stay as well, or is it basically just the money, contracts, and livable wage?
I think that there's a mix, and it depends, of course, on each individual person. I think for some people, wanting to migrate to Canada is definitely part of the reason why they apply to Canadian research institutions, whether it's for their research degrees or whether it's for their postdoctoral fellowships. So I think that immigration incentives would definitely attract researchers. For me personally, that wasn't a strong factor in wanting to come to Canada. Returning to Australia was always part of my personal plan, but I can imagine that there are lots of people who would find migrating to Canada on a permanent basis to be a strong incentive.
Okay, well, thank you. I've got basically no time left, basically. I'll just forgo my time then.
Okay. Mr. Stroke, I just want to acknowledge, you're right, there's been a lot of good questions from a really interested committee. Thank you for your questions. And now for 5 minutes to Monsieur Lauzon.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. And once again, I'd like to thank the witnesses here this evening. Ms. Bridge-Cook, when you talked about endometriosis, well, I did some reading, and I learned a little bit about this disease. Now, I have a question. We want to retain our best talent, but how can we allow our best talent also to create and we want to retain them? Now, I understand that endometriosis, and you were very helpful in teaching us that this is not very well known. Now, if there were an association in Canada, like the Cancer Association or the Diabetes Association, or in Europe, there's Endo France, an association that deals with endometriosis. Would this help you?
Yes, I think that definitely it would. We do have, so I was a founding board member of the organization that's currently the only registered charity for endometriosis in Canada, and that is the Endometriosis Network Canada. It's a very grassroots organization focused on increasing awareness, providing patient education, government advocacy, and support for people with endometriosis. But, as a grassroots organization that's focused on a gendered disease, our funding is very low. If we were to grow bigger, for example, obviously the Heart and Stroke Foundation or Canadian Cancer Society is a completely different level of organization, but they're also able to fund research, run enormous programs, and have a tremendous impact through their work. So I think it is really important to support organizations like this in our work, for sure.
Okay, thanks. I have a sub-question on this one. J'aimerais savoir...
I'd like to know, now I know that you explained that you want this disease to be recognized and understood, but what can we do as a government to help familiarize people with this and to help to retain researchers in this area? How can we help you in this in a concrete way?
I think that funding for research is a big important thing. We know that endometriosis research in Canada is quite underfunded compared to other conditions. So, for example, the funding per affected Canadian for endometriosis is only $7.41. And that's compared to, for example, inflammatory bowel disease, which affects far fewer individuals, receives funding per affected Canadian of about $340. So, endometriosis is a very under-researched area due to a lack of funding. So the federal government can certainly help through research funding. Through the CIHR, there isn't really a great institute that is dedicated, or that endometriosis researchers don't have a great home to apply to for their grants in endometriosis. So restructuring of the CIHR would help encourage those applications. And as Dr. Leonardi described in the opening statement, separation of gynecologic diseases from obstetrical diseases, which tend to receive prioritization. And in terms of awareness, the federal government could provide funding for awareness campaigns that could reach many more Canadians than our small grassroots organization can ever hope to do.
Merci beaucoup pour la réponse.
Thank you for your answer. My next question is for Ms. Nanak. I see that you speak in impeccable French. I don't know if you're Francophone or not, but you certainly speak good French. And you're in Alberta. You talk about the retention of Francophones in these areas in Alberta, and what is your strategy? Thank you. Well, there aren't that many Francophones in Alberta. I come from France. This is why I speak French the way I do.
I'm more used to speaking English in the last 20 years. And so the retention of, because GlycoNet is a network, a pan-Canadian network, so we work a lot with people from Quebec too. And we have at least most of the universities in Quebec are part of our network. And what we do is the retention here is they stay in Canada. They may not stay in Quebec, but because we have these partnerships and collaborations, they may go from after their studies to do a postdoctoral fellowship somewhere else in Canada, in another province.
I regret.
And they will come back.
I'm so sorry. Perhaps, Mr. Lauzon,
Thanks
you
a
might
lot.
like a written answer there.
No, that's okay.
Okay. I want to say thank you to all our witnesses. Very good discussion. We're grateful. And Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca and Mr. Cannings, I'm sorry.
Mr. Blanchet-Jonca.
Last round next time. We will briefly suspend and we will come back for our third panel. Thank you, one and all. Suspended.
Thank you.
Sure. Everyone's working hard. It's 2 hours in, and we're delighted to go into our third panel tonight. And we are pleased to welcome from the Apply Board, Martin Basiri, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder, Institute for Science, Society, and Policy. We have Sarah Laframboise, a student in biochemistry from the University of Ottawa and the president of the Ottawa Science Policy Network. We have also Paul Dufour, a senior fellow. And from MyTax, we have John Hepburn, the Chief Executive Officer. We're delighted to welcome you to this inaugural committee and on this important study. We will hear from each group for 5 minutes. At the 4.5-minute mark, I will hold up a yellow card, which lets you know there's 30 seconds to go. And with that, we will start with the Apply Board. Welcome, and for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, rest of the committee, for engaging in this important matter. It's actually very encouraging to see everyone talking about talent and how to attract the best talent and retain them and develop them. My name is Martin Basiri. I came from Iran in 2010 to Canada to study at the University of Waterloo for my master's in engineering. And I loved it here. So I brought my brothers, Mehdi and Masi, to also come here to study as an international student. A couple of years later, exactly 7 years ago today, we started Apply Board, the largest online platform on planet Earth for helping international students to go to Canada, United States, UK, Australia. Apply Board is one of the fastest growing companies in Canada and the world. So far, we help over 300,000 students from 130 countries in the world. And we have about 1,500 staff globally, with almost 1,000 of them here in Canada. I would like to talk about a couple of very important remarks. As a CEO of a tech company, and also as someone who worked with tens of thousands of talent that come into Canada and other countries, and seeing immigration policy of other countries, I think these remarks can bring another point of view to the committee. As you know, right now, Canada and other Western countries, talent shortage is a very, very big problem. In Canada, especially, we have over 1 million jobs open, and we don't have enough people for going to these jobs. And a lot of companies' growth is capped because of the talent shortage. Coast to coast, you go to any type of business, from like highest grade of tech companies to even grocery stores, they have talent shortage. And what's the solution for that? I believe Canada has the best immigration in the whole world, and among them there is 3 to 4 programs that are very, very targeted to solve this talent shortage problem. One of them is a study permit, the student visa, the work visa, a skilled worker permanent residency, and a startup visa, which, by the way, I also got my permanent residency through a startup visa and was able to stay here in Canada and build our company, me and my brothers. These programs by policy are the best in the whole world, but other countries are catching up and they're trying to attract the best talent. These days, talent can go to any country in the world. You know, if you are the best developer, you can almost go to any country, from Singapore to UAE to France, Germany, Netherlands, UK, Sweden. So it's no longer only like a country like Canada or United States benefit from inbound immigration and attracting the best talent. So we need to continuously invest in our immigration, especially the systems and the policy, to make sure it's the most seamless. Because if you are a top talent, if you are a top developer, or if you are a good doctor, if you are a good nurse, you can literally go anywhere. They're like everywhere, they want you there, and we are literally in a global village right now. And you want to have the best and seamless system. And our immigration system right now, even though it's a very good policy, it has a lot of things that we need to continually invest. One of them is predictability of time, right? If someone want to come to Canada and at the first moment we are basically like they have to deal with instead of 4 months, they need to deal with 2 years of wait. Of course, that person, even if they come to Canada, they don't have a confidence that, I can apply for my permanent residency after that because they don't know how long it takes. They don't know how long it takes to bring their family over or wife or husband or their partners here. So speed and reliability in terms of predictability is very important. The other thing is like we have a huge labor market and we have a data. We can real time know exactly what are the job openings and which jobs are having a hard time filling up. Though we don't steer our study permit and a skilled worker in a real time to these programs, right? We know, for example, what in literally every single town in this country, what jobs they need. I think we need to align our skilled worker and our study permit very more aligned with the labor market. So we can, as we bring in the talent, we can bring them, and it's better for the students because they study what is the market need them and they find job. Not they come here and study something and then the reality hit them, oh, they should have studied something else. The second piece is government funding.
Mr. Basiri, I am so sorry to interrupt. I want to say thank you for sharing a bit of your story. I have to be fair to everyone, and I know colleagues will want to ask you questions. So thank you. And now we will go to the Institute for Science, Society, and Policy for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame Chair and members of the committee. Merci pour votre invitation ce soir. Mon nom est Paul Dufour.
Thank you for your invitation this evening. My name is Paul Dufour.
With the Institute for Science, Society, and Policy at the University of Ottawa. With me is Sarah Laframboise. She is associated with ISSP and a PhD student in biochemistry. And she will have some quick remarks immediately after mine. But before we make our short remarks, permit us to congratulate you, Madam Chair, for your considerable efforts in establishing with your colleagues this new House of Commons Committee on Science and Research. It is indeed a welcome addition to our parliamentary house. My own career path has been an eclectic one in the science policy world, but suffice to say that at the ISSP, the issue of talent training remains critical, whether it is here in Canada throughout our educational institutions, labor market, and federal labs, or around the globe. Our institute, led by Dr. Monica Gattinger, is well known for the work of the intersection of science with policy society. We've just released a strategic plan that builds on our research work over the past decade, as well as outlining new directions. And at the heart of this vision is providing students with the opportunities, skills, tools centered on the rapidly evolving knowledge space of science and research policy. I've had the privilege of teaching at the Institute and interacting with the next generation of talent in our science, society, and policy world. This includes the Ottawa Science Policy Network, but also working closely with others such as the Student-Led Science and Policy Exchange in Montreal, the Science Policy Center, the Students on ICE team based in Quebec, the Canadian Science Policy Center, and not to mention the fabulous cohort of MITAC Science Policy Fellows. I'm also monitoring and mentoring the Diverse and Creative Youth Council that is advising the government's chief science advisor and her office on next generation issues associated with science policy. And I can honestly say that all of these networks of talented students, researchers want to make a difference. And like my oldest granddaughter, who's about to start her university studies in pharmacy in Quebec, are passionate about learning so they can apply their skills, entrepreneurship, and knowledge to build a better society. But they will need your support, and they will also need a better understanding of how the public policy world works. So I do hope that you can help provide them with some of the necessary tools and guidance to make this happen with your recommendations in your report and with your own efforts in your own respective constituencies. And who knows, Maybe a new pairing scheme of science students with members of parliament can be contemplated here, or perhaps some of our emerging talents may even find their way on this very committee in the future. Merci, thank you. And with the chair's permission, if I could let me turn this over now to Sarah Laframboise, my colleague, who will speak briefly about a very important survey result. Merci.
Thank
Sarah.
you, Paul. Thank you. As mentioned, my name is Sarah Laframboise, and I am a PhD student in biochemistry at the University of Ottawa. I want to thank again the members of the committee today for having me, and I hope to provide a student perspective on graduate student life and funding. While pursuing my PhD, I've been heavily involved in the science policy landscape, where I was fortunate to meet Paul from the ISSP, where I'm also a member of the Leadership Council for the Institute. Last year, I founded the Ottawa Science Policy Network, where I've been investigating graduate student funding in Canada. As we heard in the committee already, there are significant challenges to being a graduate student in Canada. Only 33% of graduate students are actually supported directly through Tri-Council awards from one of the 3 federal granting agencies. The rest are supported indirectly through stipends provided from their supervisors' research grants or departments. And this leaves students vulnerable to financial instability and creates a financial barrier of entry to pursue graduate degrees in science. In December of last year, we launched a national graduate student finance survey. Over the last 4 months, I've met with graduate student associations across Canada, and we've listened to countless stories of struggles, inequalities, and crippling debt. Simply put, graduate students need more support. It's important to note that these students are young adults, typically between the age of 20 and 30, who care about things like housing, savings, and starting a family. Currently, an average student in Canada makes $19,000 at the master's level and $21,000 at the PhD level. After paying tuition and compulsory fees, this leaves a master's student with about $10,000 and a PhD student with only $12,000 to live off of for the rest of the year. This is hardly enough to pay rent in most major cities in Canada, let alone other necessities like food, transportation, or hydro. These were all aspects of the survey that we wanted to investigate, and the survey just closed a few weeks ago with over 1,300 responses from graduate students across Canada. While the results are still preliminary, I'd like to share some key highlights with you. We have found that almost 45%
Ms.
of students...
Laframboise, I am so sorry to do this just as you're giving us the results, but I know we have these tremendous colleagues who are going to really ask good questions. Monsieur Dufour, Ms. Laframboise, thank you both. And now if we could go to my tax for 5 minutes, please.
Oui, merci, Madame Chair. Moi, je suis John Hepburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm John Hepburn, and at the present time I'm in Vancouver. And it's almost evening, so good evening to all. I know my French is quite weak, so I will be speaking English.
The chair of this committee knows us very well, I think, but many of you probably don't know us. So my tax is, somebody was telling me in a recent meeting that we're Canada's largest not-for-profit. That's close. We're somewhere behind World Vision Canada, but we're certainly many times larger than most of the not-for-profits, health charities and the like that support innovation in this country. I'm not here to beg for money from the federal government. The federal government is very generously supporting us with 2 long-term funding agreements for just under $1 billion. That money is matched by all 10 provinces plus Yukon Territory plus industry support. So what do we do with all this money? We provide work-integrated learning opportunities based on innovation partnerships between post-secondary institutions and industry and not-for-profits, and also we've expanded to include municipalities and hospitals. So our goal and our stated purpose is to increase innovation and prosperity in this country, to increase social innovation, basically for the good of all Canadians. 20% of our activity is in international programs, and so we bring very talented students like Mr. Basiri to Canada under our Global Link programs, and success for us is to have a student arrive, a senior undergraduate student arrive from someplace that's not Canada, to spend a stage in a Canadian university before they make their decisions about graduate school. The goal is to convince them to come to a great Canadian university for their PhD, at which point they can get a MyTax internship. We provide about 20,000 of those per year to work on a joint research project between Canadian industry and a Canadian university. That student is then eligible for support through our E-Accelerate program to start a company. And we have examples of students who've done exactly that. So how do we retain students? I think the answer there is we first of all take advantage of our fabulous universities, which attract talent from around the world. We work with them to provide them with opportunities to work between the university and industry. And we do this at MyTax. Many of the students, I won't say most, but almost half the students we deal with have come to Canada to study PhDs as international students. These students who get MyTax internships, 75% of them remain in Canada after their degree, master's, PhD, or postdoc. And they remain in Canada to work and apply their talents to the benefit of Canadians and obviously to their own benefit. This retention rate is 30% higher than the retention rate for students who come as international students and don't do a MyTax internship. We have an agreement with the government of Manitoba that anybody who does a MyTax internship is automatically registered in the provincial nominee program for fast track to permanent residency. And we're talking with other provinces about doing the same thing. However, what I'd like to say is, in addition to supporting organizations like MyTax, one thing the federal government can do is, I know that innovation is a big part of the current agenda, support innovation in this country, because talented students are not going to come and stay in Canada unless they have great jobs to go to post-graduation, unless they can start their own companies like Mr. Basiri, or unless they can work for existing companies. That's why students go to Stanford. Let's not fool ourselves. Stanford's a great university, but they go there because they know they're going to get a fantastic job when they graduate. That's critical. One way the government can do this, and I think I'm running out of time, I was just in Edmonton, Alberta for an announcement of a partnership between ourselves, Alta ML, which is an artificial intelligence company, and the government of Alberta, which is going to establish something called govlab.ai, actually using a Canadian company to solve government problems using machine learning. If they're successful, these problem-solving solutions, which are intended, their first project is predicting wildfires, for example, something we care about a lot in British Columbia, but they're also going to work with health data to provide more efficient healthcare for Albertans. If they develop these solutions, and they will, because Alta ML is a very successful, rapidly growing company that we've been working with for years, well, they're not that old, for 4 years. If they're successful, they can commercialize these products, they can build their company, and actually using the government procurement process, they can become a successful company, which will then employ loads of students and attract more students.
Mr. Hepburn.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hepburn. We appreciate it. You've all given us the committee so much to think about. They're eager to get started, and you have a really interested committee. So with that, we will go for our 6-minute round, and we begin with Mr. Williams tonight.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm going to start with Mr. Basiri. You were talking about a few recommendations, so I think I'd like to get you to continue that if you can. And my specific question is, what specific recommendations can you make for Canada to be the best at talent and immigration attraction for the future?
Yes, absolutely. So I try to cover it very fast, so there's time for others as well. So the first one is the second recommendation I wanted to say is procurement. That is very important. Like if you ask all the CEOs, majority of CEOs tell you that $1 of revenue is far better for a company than $1 of grant or funding. So if government buy the products that we create, even the ones that they fund themselves, sometimes they don't buy, or majority of times they don't buy. So if government buys the product that companies in Canada create, we can get create big companies, and innovation in Canada grow faster. Government is the biggest spender in Canada, but when it comes to procurement, majority of that dollar, for example, in technology, in software technology, is going to big companies in the United States because they're just being safer. But isn't it innovation is all about risk? So if we have companies in Canada that innovating, instead of just a free grant, I would just buy the product from them. Yes, it has some risk, but it creates it creates very sustainable innovation over there. And the third one, you ask about it. It's about our immigration. I think we need to solve the technology aspect of it instead of, I think, government trying to like solve everything themselves. There are so many softwares out the market in the business world that can solve a lot of these problems that we are dealing with our immigration. I think, I don't know, like other ministries, like how they're solving their technology problems, but the whole Canadian immigration system can be built very fast if there is a willing for using the current technologies in the market, and I would recommend that one. And then connect it with a good AI ML that get the labor data and give a very good alignment between our immigration and our market. So, for example, right now our immigration takes...
Mr. Basiri, I'm sorry, I just am short of time, so I'm just going to stop you there, but thank you very much. If you have anything else for all witnesses, please submit in writing to the committee, and then we can get the rest of your data. Mr. Hepburn, you've talked about the shortages of laborers, and certainly even back in 2020, you had an interview where you talked about Canada shifting to a knowledge-based economy and shortage of labor. Do we find that labor shortage is across the board, knowledge-based? Is that something that you're looking to solve through MyTax right now? And what kind of labor shortages are you seeing?
We're seeing a lot of labor shortage. All the companies that we're dealing with, and the labor shortage is actually pretty much across the board. Any skilled trade, even there's a labor shortage. But certainly, at the high end in the tech economy, in the knowledge economy, companies are crying out for talent. They're competing with the Americans. So an artificial intelligence graduate can work for an American company for starting salaries up to and including $300,000 a year. So there's a real arms race on for talent. Our goal is to keep the talent in Canada. We have unbelievably good universities, so the talent is here. People like Mr. Basiri come to Canada because of our great universities. MyTax job is to keep them here, and we've been working with companies like OneQubit, with Xanadu, with AltaML, to basically provide them with talent. One-third of the technical workforce.
Thank you, Mr. Hepburn. Through the chair, you talked about a program you have that 75% of your scholarship through the program stay in Canada. We had a witness in another study, well, it's one of the reps from University of Waterloo, that we lose 75% of our software engineers to the U.S. So through your program, what are we doing to, just like that scholarship program, what are we doing to keep talent, or what could we do better to keep that talent in Canada?
Connect them to industry before they graduate. That's as simple as that. The reason why we're so successful keeping students is they come to Canada with no Canadian experience, no Canadian connections. They enter into a strong academic program, and if they graduate without building the industry connections in Canada, why not go to the United States? Why not return back to the country they come from? If they get the industry experience and the industry connections, then they'll get offered a job before they graduate, and they'll stay. Simple as that. I mean, that's why we're successful.
Mr. Hepburn, thank you very much. And one thing that you mentioned, I think you were getting close to talking about an incubator system where, and maybe Mr. Basiri was talking about that well, is if we have companies or immigrants who want to come to Canada who might have an idea, the incubator might be that we bring those entrepreneurs here to start that. Is that something that you've looked at through your programs at MyTax? So starting an international incubator, I guess is how we'd classify it?
Yeah, we have agreements with most of the university-based incubators across the country, and we also have agreements with international incubators. We have a program to send entrepreneurs abroad to incubators abroad that we have agreements with so they can develop international markets. But we work with all the Canadian incubators, and we have a program to support startup companies. Once they actually become companies, we can actually support them with MyTax interns.
Thank you very much. And last little point, Madam Chair, if you have any examples of those, can you please submit those in writing to the committee so we can put that into our study? Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'm right on time. Thank you all. And now we will go to Ms. Diop for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for coming tonight. We very much appreciate that. Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Hepburn of MyTax, when I saw that your company was on the list. I kind of took I knew I had worked with MyTax at one point, and I looked at it. And in the fall of 2020, when I was as a provincial minister in Nova Scotia, we partnered, I guess you could call it, with MyTax and invested $1 million to provide up to 250 internship for university and college students to work with local business. And I remember at the time hearing stories of former MyTax interns regarding the talent development and entrepreneurship. And I know Dalhousie, for example, partners quite a bit with MyTax. So can you explain to us the value of these partnerships and how does it support the development of student talent?
Thank you very much. I was just in Halifax last week talking to your former colleagues, I guess. We, in fact, delivered 600 internships in Nova Scotia. So we not only spent the $1 million Nova Scotia government gave us, but we supplemented that with the money provided generously by the federal government. The internships in Nova Scotia are critical for keeping the talent that places like Dalhousie and Acadia and other universities in Nova Scotia attract to the province. We were at a celebration of startup companies, young entrepreneurs who've been aided by both our programs and the Lab to Market program out of Dalhousie University, which trains young entrepreneurs. They've established companies in Nova Scotia and they're going on to success. And I have many, many success stories of companies that we have supported. Graphite Innovation Technology, developing coatings for ships' hulls that prevent biofouling, and thus reduce fuel costs by many, many percent. So good for the environment and good for shipping costs.
How would you say talent retention for urban institutions like Halifax and differ from those in smaller schools and rural settings that you've worked with?
Obviously, the urban schools have more students and more research. But we work with other smaller institutions in Nova Scotia, for example, and we have worked with the fishing industry in Nova Scotia. So we work across the country, St. John's to Victoria. We have business development people in places like Chicoutimi, Trois-Rivières, Thunder Bay. We work very hard with smaller institutions, but obviously the larger institution, the urban centers, are where most of the jobs are. But no, we're very proud of our record on smaller institutions.
How would you say Canada compares to the G7 and the OECD peers, in your opinion, to retaining of those talents?
Compared to the giant vacuum cleaner south of the border, not so well. Clearly, talent is attracted to the large American centers. We're not bad, but our innovation economy is weak. We need a stronger innovation economy if we're going to have productivity that doesn't constantly lag American productivity growth. So we could do better. Let's put it that way.
What other recommendations do you have for us? What kind of incentives or other government programs that you think that we don't have or that we do have that we can do better on?
Getting back to what Mr. Basiri said, I think take advantage of government procurement to support growing Canadian companies. I think investment funds, which I know the government has established, the new innovation organization that is yet to be finalized, things like that. I think more direct support for growing companies. That's the way the Americans do it. They do it through procurement and direct support for growing enterprises.
How can our businesses further help leverage the talent from the educational institutions? Because we've heard a lot and we know that we have wonderful universities and colleges, I would say in Nova Scotia, but across the country. How can we partner more and get and seek help from businesses and non-academia? Because we've heard a lot that to have talent you need jobs and you need good paying jobs, and And in order to do that, you need the partnerships and people to sort of do networking and all of that. So what else can we do?
Well, I think universities should work harder on partnering with academic institutions and taking advantage of the talent that's there. Most students who graduate with masters and PhDs, in fact, go on to work in industry. They don't go on to academia. They become like Mr. Basiri and establish companies. So I think industry needs to invest more in innovation. It needs to take more risk, and whatever supports incentives government can give to do that. But I think support the companies that are established with through procurement and through direct support. But industry needs to work harder in partnering with universities.
Thank you very much.
And vice versa.
Thank you, Ms. Diab. And again, thank you to all our witnesses. We are really grateful. Maintenant, je vous passe la parole.
Now, I will give the floor to Mr. Blanchet-Jonca for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to say hello to our witnesses here for the third hour of our study this evening. My first question is for Ms. Laframboise. I met with your colleagues at the University of Toronto, some of your counterparts this morning, for the Institute for Science, Society and Policy. Now, there was a subject we dealt with last week in our study, and it's on funding. Funding or various granting organizations or granting agencies. I'd like to know, you were talking about the value of postdoctoral fellowships. The numbers speak for themselves. It seems that some students don't have enough money to meet their basic needs with their fellowships or scholarships, and they have to find other ways to be able to continue their studies.
Sorry, I don't think I occurred a question with that one, but I couldn't agree more. I think it was just part of the translation there. But
Je répète, Madame Laframboise.
I'll repeat it, Ms. Laframboise. Do you think that the funding is adequate, is sufficient for postdoctoral studies, study scholarships and fellowships?
Yeah, and thank you for the question. I would start by saying no, I don't think they're sufficient, and I think most students across Canada would agree with me on that. In fact, research that Science Policy Exchange and other groups have done have shown that students do want it to be increased and that it isn't covering their expenses that they have. So I have lots of data from our survey and others that show that it isn't enough.
Pourriez-vous nous partager des données? Qu'est-ce qui devrait être?
Yes, I'd like you to share your data with us. What are the main factors that make it such that the government isn't attracting the best talents to our institutions and to our country?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to not say that funding is a big part of this. The students are overall very stressed and anxious about their studies, about their finances. A big part when we're talking about retention of students in general is really student debt once they are graduating. So we're seeing about 40 to 45% of PhDs graduating with student debt, and that's valued at about $20,000. When we're thinking about then going on to postdocs, as you're mentioning, this is not enough to even pay their student loan payments along with their expenses. So this becomes very troubling for students when we're thinking of retaining talent. I have to comment as well on marginalized groups, underrepresented groups. This disproportionately affects these groups who maybe don't have the choice to take on these lower income roles. They do maybe have dependents or families that also would be funded through these sources. So these are big topics of concern for students.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais poursuivre pour...
Thank you very much, and I'll continue with Mr. Dufour, sir. We see that in Canada, the rate of doctorates is falling compared to other countries in the OECD. Are there any factors that would explain this, according to you?
Mais si vous avez bien...
if I understood correctly, I heard someone in another panel who said something about not having enough doctorates. What the problem is that we have too many and we can't find jobs for these people. So these people are discouraged and they just leave the system and they do something else. And all the knowledge they've acquired in the system, be it in the private sector or various sectors of the economy or the environment. So it's a real loss of all the knowledge these people have acquired. And we need incentives to show that we can support these people, to show these people that we can do this. Sir, more concretely, can you give us some data or information that would help us could you get this information to people so they could find a job or find an opportunity?
Une des recommandations, et ça
Well, one of the recommendations I would make, and we've been talking about this for a long time, is that there are so many programs, incentive programs for people in research, but there isn't a platform where these people could find the necessary information about funding. We would need a platform where people can get the information they need across Canada. Canada has all kinds of incentives, but people have to be able to find them. The provinces also have programs, scholarships, fellowships, and other forms of funding. So for me, the issue is, where can we get all this information together? Now, people who are interested in AI, it would be wonderful if I could find the information on one platform. Mr. Dufour, I'm so sorry.
Stop you there. Thank you, Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca. And now we will go to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and thanks again to the witnesses. I'm going to go to, I'd like to ask Mr. Baziri some questions about, I think you more or less opened your comments by saying, in terms of attracting top talent to Canada, attracting international students, especially that, I think you said that the 4 programs that Canada has to do that, the visas and permits, are among the best in the world. As MPs, we are all, I would say, beset daily by examples where that hasn't worked for people, where people have found great delays in getting various types of visas, not just student visas. And I think you were I just wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe expand on that and talk about how the execution of those programs can be improved for Canada in terms of making the process more efficient, getting students into positions that they are fit for, etc. So I'll just give you that time to expand on that.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So the policies behind the programs are very well, but other countries are catching up very soon. Right now, delays and the process is not good. It takes so long. Like, to give you example, like for example, majority of places on planet Earth, a Canadian study permit right now, the time is 6 months. So for you to come to fall semester, which is starts September, you should have already applied by April 1st. However, universities issuing their acceptance like a lot of time May or June. Means like the system doesn't work. You can't get your acceptance in May, and then your visa take like 7 months. Or for example, even for a country like India with SDS that is supposed to be a fast track, it's taking like 4 months. It's kind of like leave a bad taste in people's mouth that, oh, if this is the first interaction and this is hard, what would be the next ones? How do I trust that in 2 years the system can work. Of course, during COVID, it was like a hard time, so we have to be fair to the system as well. But yes, the system can be very good. Purely with technology, we can fix it. Like we have some recommendation, we talking to them. This is not a hard problem. Like humans right now, we send rockets to the moon and to the Mars. Like this is not a hard problem to solve a good software. So I think it's just a will. If the government has the will to solve it, it's very fixable. I don't think it takes more than a year to fix the entire thing to be the best in class. And also it has to be aligned with the labor market. Right now we have 100,000 healthcare worker need, but then a study permit is doing nothing about that, you know? So it's kind of seems like it's kind of disconnected. These are acting independently. If these two work together, which with a good system, an AI engine can easily solve this, then Canada can just flourish. It's a land, we have a lot of land, is a good healthcare system, people are nice. Canadians are welcoming almost like whatever race you are or whatever nationality you are. We have a huge shot for future, you know. I bet future belongs to Canada if we can like really invest in our immigration service.
Thank you. And now I'd like to turn to Ms. Laframboise or Monsieur Dufour and talk about science and policy. And I have interacted with, you mentioned Monica Gattinger, and through her, I think it was her positive energy program. I attended a lot of those events. And I'm just wondering about, I've been involved peripherally with a group called Liber Aero. I don't know if you've heard of Liber Aero. It's a privately foundation-funded program to connect early career environmental scientists with policymakers, with decision makers, with the media to really give them a good grounding in how to get their results out into society. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on that in Canada and what the government could be doing to help us, you know, once we have, you know, all these excellent scientists working, how we can make sure we take advantage of their findings in their research.
Merci pour la question, Richard. Can I take this, Sarah, for a few seconds? And then thank you very much for that question. Of course, it's an issue that preoccupies much of what our institute does. And, you know, there are a number of programs out there that you mentioned, Liber Aero. I'm familiar with that. And what we're trying to do with the ISSP through our various workshops and events around this interface between science, society, and policy. But I did mention in my remarks, you know, the MITACs, you know, Mr. Hepburn's organization has a fantastic program that's funded, you know, through various federal departments and agencies in part to have senior top-level grad students to join a department or an agency in the federal government, and actually, by the way, in some provincial governments as an experiment, to provide their skill set to the public service in those, you know, various organizations. And it goes both ways, by the way. So, you know, they're learning, right? But so is the public service learning about, you know, how science is and research is conducted.
Mr. Dufour, I'm sorry to do this. It's the worst part of this is interrupting Mr. Cannings. Thank you for the questions. We will now go into the 5-minute rounds, please, and we begin with Mr. Tucker.
Thank you kindly, Madam Chair. My question is going to be for John from MyTax. We've all had a challenging 2 years with the pandemic. I can't imagine it would have been easy bringing in international students. How have you handled all the travel regulations and the troubles that the last 2 years have been?
What a troubling question. the first year of the pandemic, of course, we had 800 students scheduled to arrive in Canada, and we had to disappoint them all because we had obviously no way of bringing them in. Second year of the pandemic, we had over 1,000 students who we knew were likely not to be able to come to Canada. We arranged virtual internships for them. So they were still able to work with Canadian researchers, but they stayed in their home countries where they were safe and there was no travel. This year, pent-up demand, whatever, we have 2,100 students who are arriving in country as I speak. And fingers crossed, we have 74 Ukrainian students who are trying to get to Canada, and we're doing our best to make sure that they can come here. So we have students from around the world coming. Fingers crossed, most of them will arrive. So yeah, the past 2 years was not much fun.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate learning a little bit more about your organization, because I think the marrying of entrepreneurship and academia and research is an important one for it to continue. You talked about partnering with different companies. May I ask who would be the largest three maybe companies that you partner with for these placements?
Oh, we partner with very large companies. We partner with large oil companies, TELUS, Bell, IBM's, the big companies. Most of our business, most of the companies we partner with, 80% are actually small and medium enterprises, less than 500 employees. That's where the growth is in the economy. That's where a lot of the innovation is. But we'll partner with anybody. We'll partner with startup companies. But yeah, we do partner with the major companies. But as I say, more than 80% of the companies we do partner with are small and medium enterprises.
We talked a little bit about funding. I believe that you were saying it was $1 billion funding. Was that over how many years?
5 years.
5 years funding, and that started in.
Well, we've been funded by the federal government since, I'm going to get this wrong and get corrected by the chair, but 2012. We had short-term funding agreements with ISED. We've been growing like mad. We double in size every 3 years. So the most recent funding agreement started with the 2021 budget, 5-year funding agreement, plus a second funding agreement which starts this year for the national quantum effort. And then, as I say, we get support from all 10 provinces, Yukon Territory, and 40% of our money comes from industry.
May I ask how you got funding in 2021 if you said you couldn't bring anyone in, but you received double the funding, if I heard you right?
Yeah. 80% of our programs are for students already in Canada.
That are already in Canada?
Yeah. Many of whom have arrived in Canada as international students.
Yeah.
But 80%, and by our current funding agreement, 70% of our internships have to be partnerships between Canadian universities and Canadian industry.
Great. And speaking of the across Canada, we heard about Nova Scotia. How has your experience been in Quebec, and how is it your experience dealing with the Quebec government on this file?
Excellent. We have about 90 of our 400 employees are in Quebec. We have a large business development team in Quebec. As I say, we have business development officers, largely in Montreal, but they're in eastern Quebec. They're in Chicoutimi. We're spread all over the country. And the Quebec government has been very generous with us. So we're quite happy with our relations with the Quebec government.
Fabulous. Is there, just speaking in general terms about, is there regions that are underserved that you guys are targeting to increase your presence in, or are there regions in Canada that are difficult to either find funding partners or find students willing to attend those universities?
Getting back to the previous question about working with, outside the major urban areas, we've put a lot of effort into working with colleges, which is a new area for us, and also northern and rural communities. And yes, that's a challenge, finding the students, matching them. But we've been working hard on that. Indigenous communities, we have several Indigenous business development people. We're working hard on that. Not as productive for our business as working in Montreal, but it's an important effort for us, which is why we now have a business development person in Whitehorse working on that.
you.
And we've been talking with Denide.
Great. One last question, if you could submit it in writing.
Sorry. And Mr. Tucker, you are always a gentleman. Would you like to ask him to submit it in writing?
Just to submit it in writing, is there one region of the globe that most of your students come from, or what are the largest two areas of the world that we receive students?
Thank
you again for your writing. Thank you again for your presentation today.
Thank you,
and your
Mr.
work,
Tucker.
which sounds amazing.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. And now we will go to Ms. Bradford for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all our excellent witnesses. So I'm particularly happy to see Martin Basiri here with us tonight. So good to see you again, Martin, and congratulations on that recent well-deserved win of the Governor General's Innovation Award. So well deserved. So I've got a number of questions I want to ask you because I think you have some important things we want to get on the record. In your experience connecting students to institutions, how much does program selection play in attracting and retaining academic talent in Canada, and how are organizations like yours assisting in appropriate program selection?
Oh, program selection is everything because in different countries, there are different job markets. So, for example, if in a market civil engineering is very hot, maybe in Canada is not as hot, or in that region is not hot, and unfortunately, is not getting done properly by the universities because it's not connected to the labor market. But the good news is companies like us trying to fill that gap, so trying to send the students to the programs that are best suited for them. But the other problem is a lot of the programs that universities are teaching is not necessarily as relevant to the labor market, or it's very delayed. So we need a faster time for universities and colleges, especially colleges, to be able to develop programs. As I know, on average, it takes them 3 years to develop a program. Industry is shifting very fast. So this time for them to get the approval for a new program, it has to be very short. It has to be under 6 months. So when a new technology, like for example, blockchain in 3 years, the whole industry change. So if a university takes time 3 years to just develop a course, a program, in 3 years it could be completely, outdated already.
Needs to be nimble. Okay, do you know what proportion of academic talent that uses your service decide they want to remain in Canada?
So the data up to 2019 that we have, 56% of international students desire, they stays after here. But when you survey them, over 75% says they would like to stay here. So the difference is probably the ones that either can't stay or they find opportunity in another country. A lot of people go to United States, especially in STEM, unfortunately. So if you are a good computer science students or engineering students, you find they're more attractive. Especially, it's very easy to, even for hard countries like Middle Easterns or Indians, to get US visa while you are in Canada versus directly going to US. So we have to do a better job of retaining them. So it's not only about attracting them.
Something more that could be done to draw more international students here?
I believe if we can invest a little bit in I go back to the software that the immigration use. One of the biggest problem is it's very unpredictable. Like for example, the students that they get visa last year, right now those students are not getting visa, or vice versa. That giving a very bad signal to the students market. For example, in India, in IIT India, the university that we want every single of those students to be here, that Canada is unpredictable. So if you're friends with this situation, last year they got visa, there's no guarantee you get visa. Oh, not only there's no guarantee, the visa rate can completely go up and down. We need to invest better in predictability and have a little longer term strategy rather than just very short-term strategy in terms of healing. This way, we can build a reputation. We can say, this is the requirement for entering, and it's same for years. So our embassies and consulates around the world, they can also market those as the requirement or entry. I'm not saying bringing the requirement lower. I say stay consistent. We can't every year. It can't be like a stock market that go up and down. It has to be more consistent because we want talent to come to our country. And good talent, they want consistency because they want to make a plan. They want to be able. If you are a very good, like in our company, it's a tech company. If you are a good software developer, and you decide to immigrate, of course, then you want to have kids, you want to have plan, you want to buy a home. So you can't say, oh, this year it takes 6 months, the next year it takes 2 years, right? You need predictability and speed.
Okay, I just got waved to close it out. So I'm going to ask you to submit to the clerk this question. What are some of the main reasons that international students come and study in Canada? If you wouldn't mind sending that answer to the clerk. And also someone else has asked me if Ms. Lambros could send her the answer to the responses that you referenced about the grad responses and didn't get to because of time limitations.
Thank you.
So sorry this was so rushed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bradford. And colleagues, this comes to the end of the panel. You have brought us such interesting information. You can see the engagement from the committee here. We say thank you for your time and your expertise, and we will adjourn this part of the meeting, and we will say thank you to you all. Good night. Meeting adjourned. And for us, we've got 5 minutes of business. 5 minutes of business. Are we cleared from?
Do you want to adjourn?
Yes.
Okay.
We're adjourned.